Welcome to Magic Without Fears, the Hermetic podcast. I'll put on my hat for you, Father Aaron Leitch. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for asking me to be here.
It's too warm to wear that, but
Oh man, I was hoping we were gonna have that the whole
okay.
time.
All right.
I don't have mine though, so I feel underdressed now.
Just put the cat on your head.
There you go. See, I got my familiar with me, so I think we're doing pretty good.
Yeah. My cat's
This
not alive anymore. I found this bronze artist and he painted it in
Oh
bronze up there. You can see.
yeah.
That's not a real cat. I'm joking.
No, I figured it wasn't. No, we got 9 of these things. This is just one. Oh, see, I'm sorry. Yeah, see, they own the place, and this one especially will let you know if you displease her. We call them the secret chiefs. In fact, our temple is actually Bast Temple, so she's in charge around here.
Very nice. Yeah, I obviously have a connection to Bast myself. We had tons of cats and kittens growing up. It was a really beautiful thing. Our first cat was named Bugs, the second one Bagheera, and the third one Crowley.
Oh wow,
Then the
yeah.
fourth was
I won't
Anatomy.
even try to name all of ours, but we've got. I mean, we get very large property. They're not all trapped in the house, but they come and go at will. They've got complete freedom, and yeah, they'll all be up here pestering me for dinner probably while we're doing this interview, so that should be fun.
Cool. Yeah, and you just finished your big pagan music Celtic festival type thing.
Yeah, it was yeah, Phoenix Fire. Well, it's Phoenix Festivals and it's their autumn meet. And they do a spring festival and they do an autumn festival. And we tried the spring festival, but there was a kind of a snafu and they had to shut it down early. And
Yeah.
then we got everything back together for another try here in the autumn, and this one went off almost without a hitch. I mean, I don't think you can actually have an event like that with no issues, but it all went through. Everyone had a good time, so it was, yeah, we had a lot of fun and we're very excited.
I'm really hoping to make it to one of those. Like I'm gonna
Oh, I
reach out
hope
to the or
so.
we just we Trudeau just scrapped the tracking app that was preventing some of us from leaving the country and coming back. So it
Oh,
looks like
wow.
international travel will be allowed for the first time for people, deplorables like me, for the first time in a long time. So I look forward to doing some U.S. Celtic festivals and stuff like that, because we can get like a full year visa for the U.S. for only $1,200, and it's a really good deal, of course, as musicians. And so it's a lot of my friends have done that American year, that year of doing American gigs, and you do what you can do, and yeah, it's a good deal.
It'll be an interesting time down here. I can promise you that. But
It's a lot
yeah, be.
easier than getting a normal visa.
Oh, I bet. I
Yeah,
bet. I bet.
you know. So,
But
but you
yeah, I
got to
hope you can
land the
swing
gig
by
though.
out here. It'd be awesome to have you guys.
It would be great. Yeah, we haven't done serious stuff like that in a long time, so it'd be great. I love doing my Celtic thing, uilleann pipes and lutes, and I do love singing in Gaelic, Irish Gaelic.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
That's awesome. Hey, maybe you
yeah,
could do a gig at the festival. You have to contact the Phoenix people.
exactly. Well, yeah, our bona fides and our chops are good enough to usually lock things down pretty easily.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm sure they're always looking for talent. So,
Yeah, yeah. So that's the hope, is to do because my American pilgrimage was cut off due to COVID in 2020. Of course, I was about to head your
yeah,
direction through the whole South. I had a wedding in Mexico I had to go to. I had book signings and lectures in Austin planned, and then
and
COVID.
just everything got shut down. It was terrible.
It was really
Fortunately, I'm kind of a recluse to begin with, so I didn't really have a lot. I mean, I do the festivals and stuff. That ended. I did we moved onto this property, and literally as we were still unpacking here, we had Carrie and I, say we, my wife and I, headlined at Florida Pagan Gathering, and that was a terrible, terrible mistake because we were so exhausted. I mean, there was just we had no business trying to take on another. I mean, it's not easy giving workshops, especially out at festivals. You're also camping, which is physically stressful. And we had no business taking on that extra stress. And I think we actually got physically sick from doing that. But the point is that that was the last FPG. We moved in here, went to that FPG, and then COVID. and we have not been to an FPG since. This festival we just hosted here is the first full festival we've actually been able to attend since then.
Very cool. At least you guys have festivals. We just don't have much going on up in Canada, so it's cool that
There's
you
a
guys
few
have.
left. There's a few left. They're kind of shrinking. I'm afraid. I mean, the internet, like the millennials and the Zoomers, they're not interested. They've got groups and chat rooms and stuff they can use to connect with each other, and they don't really feel the need for the festivals the way folks like us do.
Well,
We
they
come
haven't
from
been to the
the
fairy party rooms at PantheaCon.
yeah, well, exactly,
They don't
so
know
they're
what's
not
possible.
they don't understand face-to-face communication. They don't, it's alien to them, I think. So, but you still have a couple hundred people show up, and that makes for a hell of a drum circle and a lot of fun and big rituals, and it's still a really awesome thing to take part in, at least a couple times a year.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's
I hope they
amazing.
keep going for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. So I was hoping today we could touch on three major subjects, which are priesthood, the Golden Dawn, and Enochian magic.
Okay.
If you're game to sort of, I don't really usually have a direction for these things because I think it's harder
Sounds
when
like
you
a
don't have.
whole lot of controversy.
Are all of those controversial?
Oh yeah, all three of those are real controversial topics, so that should be a lot of fun.
Okay, good. Well, why don't we maybe we can start off with the priesthood issue because we had, or maybe we should leave that to the end. I don't know. Let's
I'll
start with
leave
the
that one up
Golden
to
Dawn.
you.
Yeah, let's yeah, that's my job, right? Let's start with the Golden Dawn. The priesthood thing touches on a person, and I don't really want to necessarily shout that person out. Um,
Oh, okay.
the so maybe save that for the final end for the Patreon bonus segment.
Oh, there you go.
Talk about what it is to be a priest, since we're priests of different sorts, and some people don't understand for some reason that recently human beings have developed this new ability. It's very new and newfangled to do multiple things in their lives. It's very odd. I know people can't wrap their heads around it, but
It
it's
is a very
happening.
strange, yeah, it's a very strange thing for people to have multifacets and different layers to their personality and things. Yeah, most people can only just do that one thing.
I blame it on the gig economy. You can't just be a Golden Dawn adept and a Solomonic magician and a pagan. You also have to be a priest. Otherwise, you're just not doing enough.
Right.
You
And,
know.
and and you have to own a shop, and you have to host festivals, and you have to the list just goes on and on.
We're kind of lucky if we love doing these things with the opportunities we have to do them today, though.
I have to agree. It's like, I mean from the esoteric side, just the amount of information that we have available to us. Unfortunately, it makes a lot of very bad information a lot more easily available too, but that's kind of always been the case. I mean, even when I first started studying in the 90s and there was no internet, even then we were taught, in a library, it's still going to be 99, it's like 99% nonsense, and your job as a researcher is to find the 1% that's actually the gold you're looking for. So if a library was being described that way, god, was that 40 years ago, then the internet is just that dialed up to 11. So it's the same, but it's just more of it. But I think it also allows us to connect with a lot more people. It allows ideas to travel further. It allows us to explore a lot of different paths that would not have simply been available to us before all the social media. You know, um, just the ability to reach out and make connections with with people that can actually help us, can actually teach us things and actually further our path, if you know how to search and you know how to research and you know how to seek for the basically, if you know how to ask the right questions of the right people. But what we have today allows us to do that. I mean, so much easier than we ever were before. I think it's kind of amazing.
Yeah, well, you just spoke with the probably the foremost um personage in the popular occult movement. I don't know how to describe it, but Dr. Justin, the Sledgehammer Sledge, has over
Oh, yes.
200,000 followers, subscribers on YouTube now, and
Dr.
people generally watch
Sledge.
his stuff all the way to the end, which means he's doing, which is phenomenal because it's
Yes.
just phenomenal. And he's an academic in this field who's also kind to practitioners, which is what we've been hoping for a long time that would develop. When I started, went to the
Absolutely.
first association for the study of esotericism in '04. I met Nicholas Goodrich Clark there, got in my doctoral program, and everything was about all the metaphors they were talking about. Him, Jocelyn Godwin, everyone at that conference was talking about building bridges. We need to build bridges to get this off the ground,
Right.
to make this work. And he's passed now, God rest him. That's why I didn't get to finish my doctorate, but I'm not going to stop building bridges. And to see Justin come along and Dr. Puka and then all these others, it's so exciting for me. It's so exciting.
It
And to have
really
you
is,
be
you
on his
know.
podcast, on his channel, I was like, thank God. He had just informed me the week earlier he would come on my podcast, and so then I saw you pop up on his. I'm like, yep, it's happening. We gotta keep this ball rolling.
Yeah, I was really honored for him to ask me not only to look over his scripts for the Enochian episodes that he was doing, but then to actually be part of the live stream. That's yeah, that I actually fanboy a little bit getting to meet him face to face, at least, online like this. But yeah, he's really incredible. He's the kind of guy that you try so hard to tell people that you can't learn magic from YouTube. Don't go to YouTube, don't go to TikTok, don't go to, that's not where you go, that's bad, don't do that.
But he's
And then
ruining your ability to say that.
yeah, he throws sand in the grains, because I said, then you gotta say, well, except for that, except for Dr. Sledge, you gotta watch his stuff, and there's a couple of others out there that do produce good videos that are worth watching. But he's the rock star of that right now, because he's really leading the way on it. And
He's shown that there's an appetite for it.
yeah, and I talked to him, and it's the same conversation that we're having right now. He does not like that separation that scholars have toward practitioners, that mental separation
Ah,
that, and I first noticed this, and it didn't start for me with Dr. Sledge. I first noticed it with the Magic and History series from Penn State Press.
yeah.
So, Claire Fanger,
Alison Kuder,
Dr. Kai Keffer, yeah, exactly. Those guys,
Claflin. Yeah.
those guys are awesome, because they were doing the same thing. That was and I know there are some other universities that started also getting like little esoteric societies together, and it was this new mindset that if we really want to understand these texts, we have to stop thinking we're above them, and that we're above the people that practice them, and actually listen to the practitioners, and that there's a lot to learn about the text by listening to the people who actually use them.
Yeah.
So there's, yeah, it was like this opening doors and building bridges, and I think that, and I always say that from our side we have to be open to their side as they are to ours, because one of the things that plagues our side is a lack of academia, is just taking whatever you read in the last book that you liked on faith, and now that's history, or I mean, God, look at the occult. I mean, how many occult books trace our traditions back to Atlantis, for God's sake? I mean, there's
That's my
occult books are not known for having good history. You know what I'm saying? So we have to have the good history, because if not, we wouldn't know 1/10 of what we know about the Grimoires today. It's academia that's translating text after text that we never had access to, or finding texts buried in collections and libraries that no one knew were there. And every one that they bring out and translate offers new insight into how that European tradition that we call the Solomonic tradition, or the Grimoire tradition, or just Western esotericism in general, how it actually worked, what they actually thought. and every new translation sheds a whole new spotlight on all the texts we already have. And it's like, oh, that's why that's there, oh, that's where that came from, and then we all have to be open to that and change our practices. For me, it's like my spirits are very accepting of mistakes, but once I'm aware of how to do it right, like if a new academic find is made, and I read something that, let's say, Joseph Peterson publishes, and he's explaining, something about a text that I've never understood before, then my spirits will actually not let me rest until I fix whatever I was doing wrong to
Yeah.
match what we now know. So it's so important to learn and to not just rely on our own, what we call UPG, unverified personal gnosis. What that spirit you summoned told you happened in ancient Egypt, you can't take that as fact. they, spirits don't really work that way. They don't work with concrete facts. So we need the researchers, and we need the history to understand what we're doing and how to do it. So
Yeah, I think it's important if you're practicing things like scrying and stuff like that, to practice on things that are verifiable, but also to remember, yeah, things that spirits tell you are probably, are probably good for you, but it may not be good for another, like St. Paul said, right? And that's a hard thing for people
well,
to remember, I think.
and it's even more complex than that, because
I
people
hope
get
so.
this idea in their head that if you're talking to a spirit, it's like you and I talking right now, and that's not how it works. Spirits don't have vocal cords. They don't have tongues. They can't vibrate air that reaches your eardrum and vibrates your eardrum. They're communicating with what they didn't have the word in the Grimoires, but they communicate with what we would call telepathy. It's just direct mind to mind communication. So a spirit literally cannot say anything to you that you do not already have the symbols for and the concepts for in your mind to receive the message that the spirit's trying to give you.
I
So
heard you
whatever
mention. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so whatever message the spirit gives you, your brain is immediately, instantaneously going to translate it and either embellish it or detract from it or mistranslate it. It's going to approximate it as best it can. So this is why we get some, like, people will say, well, why couldn't the spirit just tell me this simple thing? Why can't the spirit just tell me what the lotto numbers are? What's so hard about that? Well, because there's no way for that spirit to transmit that to you. You don't know what those lotto numbers are. So how is it supposed to transmit those lotto numbers to you? So everything that the spirits try to communicate to us, they have to kind of lead us to step by step, by tossing out little pebbles, then leading us to the correct information, or leading us to the teacher who can reveal the information, or to the book, or whatever. And or if you're scrying with them, you have to understand the symbols that they're using to communicate with you, and the more of those symbols the easier it is, and the more elaborate their communications can be. So yeah, it's always going to be, what a spirit tells me is not what he's going to tell you. But you and I could be sitting in the same room during the same scrying session, both of us seeing the same spirit through our astral senses, for lack of a better term, both of us hearing the spirit, and we would both get entirely different messages. So it's never going to be the same from one person to the next, or even from one session to the next. It's a very subjective process.
Yeah, and you mentioned UPG, which is I could it's somewhat accurate for me to say that it's a pet peeve of mine, but not entirely. Let me unpack that, because this will make a great little bit for some people who. So here's my thinking. UPG means unverified personal gnosis, for the folks at home who are new to occultism in its modern variations, but it's
That's
unverified
shop talk.
personal gnosis. Now, we all know that gnosis and Gnostics and Gnosticism are not all exactly the same thing. So we're going to push aside Gnosticism and Gnostics and focus just on gnosis. The idea of gnosis itself, right, is, how would you define gnosis roughly? You don't have to worry. You don't have to be too precise, just roughly.
Well, in the yeah, it really doesn't have any relationship to Gnosticism as
Exactly.
the
So we're pushing
religious
that out.
sects.
Yeah.
It just means now that it's the way that the Gnostics use the term,
Yeah.
and what it means is to have personal experience of something. Think of the biblical meaning of the word to know. You can know the girl next door, or you can know biblically the girl
Yeah.
next door. In the Bible, if they were going to say you know the girl next door, they would use the word gnosis, that you had gnosis of her,
And
which
in
is
Hebrew,
different
in
than
Hebrew, it's
just
yada, yada,
right. So,
and it's a depth
right,
knowing.
right.
It doesn't necessarily mean sexual, but it could mean that.
Right. You can have gnosis of mathematics. You can have gnosis of, whatever, but it means to have a direct personal knowledge and understanding and experience of what you're talking about, which is that's a big problem in modern occultism, right? People talk about things they have no experience of. Look, Golden Dawn. We're going to talk about the Golden Dawn, right? Well, the Golden Dawn that's one of the biggest problems we have. You can go online right now and listen to thousands of people tell you all about the Golden Dawn, how it works, what it is, what it isn't, what's wrong with it. And none of them have actually been in the order. None of them have gone through the system. Maybe some of them have poked around at it, self-initiation, astral initiation. Maybe they made it to Zealot in an actual temple somewhere. But like 99.999% of the people you hear talking about the Golden Dawn online have not actually ever taken initiation in an order. So they do not have gnosis of the Golden Dawn. But if you're talking to someone who has actually been initiated all the way through the order and into their inner order, then you're talking to someone who has actual gnosis of the Golden Dawn. So unverified personal gnosis is just, forget unverified for a second, but personal gnosis. If I do a ritual and I ask a spirit a question and I scry that spirit's answer, then that's gnosis. I'm getting that information directly from a spirit. I'm not reading the Bible. I'm not asking another person. I went to the source and I had a direct experience and I got an answer.
So,
But go ahead. So
isn't it
you were saying?
redundant to call it unverified and personal? Because that's what gnosis is necessarily. It's necessarily personal. Otherwise, it wouldn't be
Well,
gnosis. And if you could verify it, it also wouldn't be gnosis. You would call it scientific fact.
what I think it's still useful because there's also a thing that we call verified personal gnosis.
Oh, see, I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
How did
So
I miss that? Okay,
great
teach
example.
me. Get me
When
up to
I
date.
first started doing, when I really got into making offerings to entities, I learned that was like a key to magic. And I would start making the feast offerings to the archangels. Very early on, I started with the Jupiter angels, and very early on, I set an offering out to them, and they said, "You need to eat some of this." And I'm like, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. I'm offering this. Why would you want me? And they said, no, take a bite of everything, take a sip of everything. You need to share this with us. And I was like, well, okay. So I did. I did what they wanted. That's how magic works, what the spirits want, the spirits get. So I shared that meal with them. And then I think I went into the Solomonic group online and I said, this is the weirdest thing. These spirits. And I assumed it's because Jupiter, they're all about feasting and family and friends and fun. And I thought, I guess it makes sense. The Jupiter spirits would want to share the feast with you. And then I started getting response after response that sharing the offering feast with the spirits you're feeding it to goes back a long way. It's known in Santeria, it's known in voodoo, it's known in other religious traditions that make sacrifices. And this is something I had never encountered before, but my spirits told me to do it. And once I told others what they had told me, they started giving me actual academic sources that no, this is something that actually happens in tradition in the real world. So my unverified personal gnosis became verified personal gnosis. And since then, I've actually learned on all the rules on how to share food with spirits, who you can share it with and who you shouldn't. And that's a whole different thing. But I never would have run into any of that if the spirits themselves had not first told it to me and for a while, it was just my own unverified personal gnosis until I learned more. Which again is why we need those academics, so they can point out the history to us when we bring up things like that.
Oh yeah, like that groundbreaking study by Sophie Page, Dr. Sophie Page, right, on how monastics used the grimoires. That verified so much that many of us had been told or learned from spirits or just passed down in the tradition. You know, it's one of the things that we might have been told things that were passed down, and we just had no way to validate any of it. And then her book came out, her research came out,
Hmm.
and
This is
and
actually new to me. I'm not
it's on
familiar
Glitch
with
Bottle.
her
I just heard it on Glitch Bottle.
work.
Even though she was
I'm gonna have
she
to.
was in a classroom I was lecturing to in Canterbury, I believe, in 2019. But I didn't really know who she was at the time. And then she thinks she finished her PhD, did Glitch Bottle. Maybe I'm getting the time mixed up, but you know, I've been locked inside for a few years, like most people.
Oh, that's
Maybe
fine.
not Floridians, but anyway, I'm joking. But she noticed that. Sorry, I'm very excited to talk to you. So of course, I'm just my goal is to not do what I did with Ash and Shazam and get blackout drunk by the end. I was very nervous to
Hey,
talk. I was
hey,
so
if I had
nervous to
something
talk to you.
here, I got. Hang on a second, because I got something here. If you want me to keep up with you a little bit, I
Oh
got
yeah, please
some
do.
mead right here. This mead was
This is
given
the party
to my wife
podcast.
and I by Dr. Sledge. He made this. So
Sledgehammer
maybe if you
makes
want,
mead.
he makes mead, and remember, you might have seen on Facebook we posted this absinthe that we were drinking. He made the absinthe that we were posting those pictures of too. That's around here too, somewhere. It's a little tiny bottle of it. It'll probably last us for years, but
Well,
it's
not if you
awesome.
open it right now, it won't.
Oh no, we already. Oh no, not right now. No.
You could keep up. Yeah, no, we have too many serious things to discuss to get blackout, or anything close. Um, and Ash and Shasan, the podcast didn't go as badly as it could have. Let's be honest. It was still a pod. Some people told me it wasn't good, but also like some really high level adepts in orders that we literally can't mention.
Mhm.
Told me they listened to it twice, they loved it so much. So what do you do with something like that, right? What do you do? Some people are like, this is shit, your shit, fuck you. And then some people are like, that was so good, I listened to it twice. And these are people that are like, that we look
Hey,
up to, right?
you'll have to sit there and
What do you
rack up
do?
views. That's what you do.
You just got to keep doing you got to keep doing you, and the people that like it
Exactly.
will stick around, others won't. But yeah,
Everything
so
you ever make should be something that you want for yourself. Like every
exactly.
book I write that book only because I wanted that book and no one else had written it. So that's how
Yeah,
everything you create should be. It just should be something that you want for yourself, and then you're willing to share it with other people too. And
this book is a gem, probably one of your most underestimated books. People probably don't realize how
yeah,
valuable
no
this
one knows
book is
about
to
that
you.
one. Nobody knows that book
As soon as
exists.
I never really noticed it, and then when I did notice it, I was like, oh, click. Yeah. No,
Well,
I was.
the other two books you got there, the Angelical Language
Yeah.
and the Complete Enochian Grimoire, those could not have been written if I hadn't done the Enochian Saga, because that was. I think I mentioned it in the intro to that book, but it was actually in a three ring binder, and I had uh each subject matter in the book. Oh, hi baby. Each subject matter in that saga was color highlighted, color coded. So I use like I forget the colors now, but it was like yellow would be everywhere that the Book of Logal was mentioned. I'd highlight yellow, and then I use blue for everywhere the Book of Silver Leaves was mentioned, or something like. And so I just had the whole thing highlighted like that. I still got it around here somewhere.
Yeah.
And I really wish I could have put those color codes into the printed version that I ended up publishing,
That would be
because those
useful.
were,
I
oh, it was so
noticed.
useful.
I did notice. You see, when I got this, the first thing I noticed was it didn't have some of the stuff I was hoping for, because you didn't actually do the first 5 books, right?
Right. Most of the making the tools and stuff. Now that's all in the complete Enochian Grim, or the essential Enochian Grimoire.
Yeah.
But not in the same format where I'm actually
Yeah.
going through
So
uh entry by entry and actually outlining everything. And I didn't have that in there. I
Well,
intended that to actually be another volume of the Enochian Saga,
well, this
but
book showed me that I needed to do that for the Liber Quincy Mysteriorum. So that's what I've been
okay.
having to do because I'm going through it page by page,
See,
comparing the Skinner
yeah, see,
with that, and I'm
you need
adding
that. You needed that book, so you're writing it.
I
That's
needed
exactly what I
this.
was
So
saying.
yeah. And so, maybe actually when I'm done my write up of that, maybe I'll send it to you in case you can, if you want to go over it and see, I don't know, who knows, but
That'd be cool.
we're all
Sure.
for development. I'm trying in my work in the Enochian system to not redo anyone's efforts. I'm trying to look at little
Mm,
aspects because a lot of people say, oh, another book on Enochian. It's like, what are you talking about? There's basically no books on Enochian. There's,
right.
and I don't mean that the way, of course, most people think I mean that. And you know what I mean, I think, right? Because
I know what you mean.
you
Yeah.
know what I mean. And it's like there's so many things that no one has looked at properly. And they're fascinating. They're just absolutely fascinating, extremely entertaining. And you sometimes come across really amazing stuff that can be added into ritual, even when you consider depurism at its finest. Whether you're allowing the Thelemites to cast aside Christ for Babylon or not. Either way, either way, um, within purism, there's a lot of decisions that get made about how to do it. And of course, a hardcore practitioner like myself tests things out. Me and my group, we tried Stanwick's method a bunch, then we tried your method a bunch. We try different things, and people, as a group, we figure out which works best for us, and as individuals, we figure out what works best for us, and those are often even different things. Like it's really helpful
Hmm.
in a group to be able to just do the oration the way it's written. But when I do my
Yeah.
personal work, every divine name, I vibrate as many times as there's letters in it.
Oh wow, that's
Because
dedication
well,
there.
that's a traditional Golden Dawn technique, and I like it.
Yeah.
It's but do I make my group go through it? No, because some of them have no interest in Golden Dawn techniques or vibration or anything like that. Of course,
Yeah.
we're all friends, so if you get a roll. Anyway, so that was really informative. Is like, yes, I have to do this to be able to put together what I'm looking at,
Yeah,
and I'm excited.
I do hope to get one more book done, which I mentioned in there. I think I mentioned in the Essential Enochian Grimoire that it's going to be more an advanced book, and that's where I'm actually going to go back into the 5 books of the mysteries because there was so much going on in the visions that the angels revealed the tools in, and all of the heptarchic information. So I really, like the relationship between the 7 instants of creation and the actual biblical days of creation, and all it's really deep and fascinating. So I kind of want to put that all into kind of an advanced Enochian book. There's also relationships between the seal of truth and the golem that
Oh, really?
that was first brought up by Benjamin Rowe, and he's passed on now, but he
Yeah.
was a massive influence in Enochian scholarship back in the 90s, and he was the first one to bring the relationship between the golem and the seal of truth. And there's just like so many of these things that are kind of buried in Dee's records that, yeah, I think at least one more book if I can get it out there. Time keeps slipping away from me, with pandemics and everything else going on. So, but I hope to get that out there eventually.
Yeah, I hope so too. Is there a book you're currently working on?
Well, yes and no, if that makes sense. No, it doesn't make sense. It's yes and no because I have the classes that I've put together. I have the Abramelin tradition classes, and I have the Solomonic 101 courses. So my goal is I actually have one more class to write for the Abramelin material because originally that course was conceived as just helping you through the 6 months of the rite. But then I decided to add material for how to actually use the system afterward. So I have
Oh
one
yeah.
more class on that to write. It's all the chthonic spirits, all the rules and methods for working with them. Once I get that done, I'm actually going to take that entire course and I'm going to kind of reformat it into prose so that it can be made into a book format. And then I'm also going to add all of the tons and tons of linguistic work that I've done on the Abramelin squares. and that I've never published that anywhere before. I've published the corrected word squares, but in order to correct them, I had to do a whole lot of work by looking up the words in lexicons and trying to figure out what the squares were actually saying. So I published the squares, the result of all of that, but I didn't publish any of my linguistic decipherings of the squares. So all of that is going to be in that book, and that's my next planned book. So I am working on it, but right now I'm only working on the actual live classes, the recorded lecture, I should say, class. And once I get that done, I can actually start putting it into book form.
It's a lot of work. Those online courses and all that stuff. People don't realize. Like I'm just putting up my first now, and it's to help people. I wrote it originally just to help my students who were like new students who are working with me, because I do a weekly class on Zoom for people who dig my vibe. And new people come in, and it's like, well, how do I catch them up? Well, I need to lay this stuff out. But then after we worked with it for a couple of years, I was like, this is good. And some people were interested in doing it, but I'm like, well, without the weekly classes, it's just a bunch of bullet points and things you have to copy, and it's not very helpful, really. So I was like, okay, make videos, upgrade it, make it better. And now I'm gonna just make it this huge intro to like Heptarchia. Like, and it's already, I put hundreds and hundreds of hours into it already. And I did years of prep, which started at the beginning of the pandemic with you beautiful motherfucker, and your course for Jason Newcomb. You did this course for Jason
Oh,
Newcomb.
yeah, the master class. Yeah.
The intro to Enochian, and your sections were all on purist sort of approach to Enochian, and I was confounded, flabbergasted, appalled, outraged, frustrated, because one of the only aspects of my 5=6 curriculum I didn't fully technically complete before hypothetically moving on to other things is the Golden Dawn Egyptian Enochian squares. And then you were on my buddy Ryan's podcast, Praxis Behind the Obscure, and you mentioned that you hadn't done that really either in your
no, that's,
and I was like, me
I'm
neither.
a Sam,
and I
that's
watched
like up in Pam, I think. Yeah.
And I was, when I watched the course you did with Jason, I was hoping you might give some insight and excite me in how to work with that, but instead you were like, so this is how Enochian is done following D's method, and it was so different. But of course, it was pandemic. We weren't even meant to leave our rooms where I was living at the time in Cali, because they went crazy in Cali. Well, the Antifa was running around burning everything down, right? So it wasn't safe outside. I got assaulted a few times just trying to leave my room to go to the bathroom. Like, people are losing their minds. Like, Black Lives Matter, if you don't put up your fist, I'm punching you. Even amongst like locals. It was weird. It was super weird. Anyway, your course opened my mind to being like, well, I love traditional magic. I love traditional grimoire stuff. I love the writings of Skinner and Pearson. What if I did approach D not in a non-Golden Dawn way? What would happen? And so I haven't stopped working on that. I've been nonstop working on that ever since March 2020, and that's because of what you presented. I really also liked Stenwick's presentations. Of course, as you probably know, I'm in touch with him, and I like his stuff as well. I like pretty much everyone's stuff except the Betty and Gerald Schuler, and I've got some issues with Jeffrey James.
I mean, James, I mean, he was, I mean, I'm fine with his work. I mean, it was the closest thing we had for a long time to anything that was deep purist. But the Schulers is where I started out with, and that was a hell of an interesting thing, because I was very young and I'd never even heard of Theosophy, so I had no idea what the hell was all these ring pass knots they were talking about, and all this structure of the Enochian universe, and they wrote like they had these schools full of students, and that they had this, you could attain this level called Enochian dragon, and it just went on and on, and I'm just like, I didn't get it. I didn't get it.
An Enochian dragon, a true living god.
I mean, really? I mean, but I was kind of done with them when I got a copy of their Egyptian magic book. I don't know if you've ever seen that one.
No, but we were all about their Enochian stuff in my Wiccan coven in the mid 90s. That like early.
Yeah, that was. I mean, if you go to any bookstore at that time and look for Enochian books, that's what you were gonna find.
Yeah.
And it was all, and of course it was Golden Dawn and Enochian, but not really even that, because it was kind of mixed with a little bit of Thelemic stuff and then a whole lot of Theosophy. But yeah, I just found most of those books frustrating. So thankfully I did move on. There was, like I said, James was good. And then there was Donald Laycock, where he gave a more of a view into Dee's records than any other Enochian book I'd ever seen. Um, and then I really enjoyed Donald Tyson's book when it came out. I personally, I think he goes off the rails when he starts putting his own theories out, the whole end of the world and all that kind of stuff. But I found him to be very good whenever, and very honest. Like when he's talking about his own ideas, he says so. And when he's actually talking about the actual original records, he kind of did the same thing Laycock had done, where he gave a better view into some more obscure parts of Dee's journals than anyone else had. So,
Yeah.
they were the best that we had for a while.
If we see farther, it's because we're standing on their shoulders for sure.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
if anything I've produced is good, it's definitely because I'm standing on your shoulders and the Stenwicks and what's his name? Oh damn. Oh,
Peterson.
Well,
Are you
Peterson.
talking about Joseph Peterson? Yeah,
Peterson, of course, but also people like
yeah.
what's the purist guy who trained Maria? He's
I'm not sure.
praised your books in the group. Oh damn, I was swore I should have
I'd
written
probably recognize if you remember his name, but
Oh, fuck. He's an older
I don't
gentleman.
know.
Anyway,
I don't know of a lot of other purists, to be honest. Deep
yeah, he's sort of.
purists. We're kind
I
of a
would.
rare breed.
I think of him as sort of the king of the purists in a way. Um. Anyway, his name might come back. Should come back to me because I talk about him all the time, and I just like it. It's interesting whenever anyone does in-depth work on this stuff, regardless of the conclusions they come to. And I just had a funny thought about UPG as we were talking about earlier. If it's UPG or VPG, both those letters are the same in Latin.
Yeah, right.
So you might be converting me. It's sort of fun. I like that kind of a conceit. That's a fun one. But yeah, so with Enochian, yeah, we've come a long way. We've come a very, very long way. And it's like only now do we really have the resources and the groundwork laid by everyone from Skinner to Peterson to Kevin Kline and yourself and Stenwick just put out his book on the Aethers, which is actually it wasn't, and he's not running with the Golden Dawn Crowley method. He's going back to like how do we influence politics, which I think is exciting. Not because it means we can fight each other with political magic, because it makes me think like maybe we could actually, instead of being oppositional as Enochian magicians, but we can be like, hey, how do we get good people into office, like whatever their parties are? You guys got two parties in the States, so you guys are always fighting. We got three in Canada, which means we have the third party and we're still just as SOL and hopeless. We're like,
yeah,
we got the three-party thing, doesn't help. It's just another group to screw us over.
Yeah.
Because every time someone gets in power, they just forget about the people and do whatever they want, and that's the problem. That's why we keep voting in different parties. It's not because one side wins and then the other side wins. It's because we just want change and we never get it. Anyway.
Oh, you never get it.
We never get it. I think that I don't think what I'm saying is even controversial, because you look at the metrics, right? And like most countries, the majority of people want the same things, and any of the parties will ever do the things that people actually want. They're like, let's focus on issues you disagree about. How about the ones we agree on? Nope.
No,
so
there's no that's not sensationalist.
Magically, I think there's room to play there as far as getting better people into these positions, because there's not much else we can do other than work with spirits. And if you don't think you can affect global politics with spirits, well, you should talk to the King of Spain and those two fleets of ships he lost twice.
Right.
He Fafes, man. He did it two times. Yeah. Legendary naval upsets. How do you explain that?
It's hard to explain. It's hard to explain.
Yeah. You'd think the second time they'd wait till they were sure that there'd be good weather. But, D did the again, apparently. He used the same spirit twice to
shit. In both cases, it was good weather.
Exactly. That's the fucked up thing about it. All right. So maybe we can talk a little Golden Dawn, because it's pretty rare that people with our experience in the Golden Dawn get to talk to each other in a public format. That's, I think, actually extremely rare.
Oh yeah. You notice I don't even really talk about it much on Facebook. It's a secret society, so I'm usually talking about Solomonic, magic, or some other subject. But the Golden Dawn stuff, I tend to leave that alone online for the most part. It's just easier that way.
Well, for those people, I my one of the most common comments I get about my podcast is thank you, thank you, thank you for doing one that's sort of Golden Dawn based or Golden Dawn centric. And that's not how I see my podcast, but obviously there's no escaping that because that's my foundation, right? I grew up in a Maharishi yoga family, but then went through Wicca led me into the Golden Dawn, which shocks most people, but you and I know why that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
It's sort of based on it. And well, if you look into the roots of Wicca, you find the Golden Dawn, right?
And the Lima.
Yeah, the Lima. So a lot of Golden Dawn people listen to this, and that's cool. So I'm curious about your thoughts on things. For example, do you have a favorite Outer Order initiation?
Do I have a favorite Outer Order initiation? Well, Zealot is kind of nice because it's really short.
Answered like a true,
and
temple
that sounds like
officer.
a joke. That sounds like a joke, but you wouldn't believe how many times we've gone to temple and it's like, oh, we got a bunch of initiations to do. Oh, which one? Zealot? Oh, okay, we can do something. Oh, I'm sorry. I've got this thing in my lap. That's why I keep looking down and I just startled her. Poor thing. I don't know if I have a favorite one. I mean, it's real easy to say the neophyte because that's the formula of the magic of light. That's kind of what a lot of inner order magic and processes are based on. So it's very foundational and you'll use it a lot. But of course, there's some uses for the other grade setups as well. Like Rigardi has the evocation ceremony that uses the Zealoter process. And I've actually used that before. It is actually effective. But I was always kind of fascinated with Practicus and Philosophus together. When you go into the when you pass out of the outer order and into the inner, you have to write a thesis, and you have to write a thesis describing your experience of each grade as you went up through them. And in my thesis, I actually referred to Practicus and Philosophus as the twin grades. And I had to combine them into one section in my thesis instead of separate because they were so intertwined. You've got the Practicus, that's your water grade, right? But yet it's got all of these fire paths connecting into it. And then the next thing you go into is Philosophus, and that's your fire grade, but it's got all these water paths connecting into it. So, and even the, like the symbols that are on the altar and the way the halls are arranged, they're like reflections of each other.
Yeah.
So
It's so
honestly,
cool.
I mean, yeah, if you're not looking at, magical formulas, I mean, specifically for use and other things, if you're not looking at, where your favorite speech is or anything like that, but if you just look at the structure of the ceremonies themselves, I mean, Practicus and Philosophus are like kind of this masterwork, the way they're woven together, and each one depends on the existence of the other. It's just fascinating. That was my favorite one to explore when I was writing my own thesis on what it was like going through them. And so, yep, that I would have to say those two together are my favorite initiation ritual.
Did you get to go through them alone?
I'm pretty sure I did. Well, I mean, first I have to say in our order, everyone does. I mean, we don't do group initiations, but I don't recall we will do them, like one after the other.
Yeah, you
and
never.
What's that?
Yeah, okay, so you never did group initiations.
What we do is like let's say there's a group of people to be initiated that day. We'll open the hall once in that grade, and then we'll bring each person through for the initiation individually. So one person comes through, takes the initiation, and then gets to sit down and watch the next one. And I mean just the initiation point. And then once that's done, you know, at the end of the rituals is the explanation point. That's where all the symbols are revealed, and this is what this means, and this is why we had you do that. That will actually have everyone that was initiated that day, will give them that information all at once. So it's a very slick way of doing a lot of initiations in a short time, but not having people have to go through their initiation in a group, because it's not meant for you to go through in a group. It's a personal thing. So each person has to go through the path walkings and the introduction into the temple. They have to do that by themselves. So
That's
I've
cool. That's
yeah, I've,
I
yeah,
like
I've
that.
never had a dual initiation or a triple initiation or anything like that. No.
Oh man, I've been in initiations with like 40 people all at once, maybe
Oh,
more.
that's just see, that's missing the point. You know, the whole point of this, and you hear me talk
It's one of
online
the
all the time
reasons.
about
It's
how
one of the
I
reasons.
don't like the psychological model of magic,
Yeah,
but
let's go
in the
for it.
Golden Dawn, it's very important. It's all about imprinting these magical symbols on your psyche and actually emblazon some of them into your actual aura, you know, that they'll be there for the rest of your life. And I just don't see how you can do that to a room full of 40 people, you know, so
It works, I'd say, as well as it did for Mathers,
yeah.
which is not to praise it. It's just
Yeah.
to accept the
Yeah, I don't agree
reality
with
of it.
everything Mathers did, but
Yeah,
that's basically our philosophy. It should be each person goes through, you know, one at a time. You know, each officer, each deity or archangel that is addressing you is just talking to you one on one, and it's a very intimate process. So, you know, I know there are orders that do things in very different ways, but I very much like the way we do it.
dude. One of my friends who I recommend to one order got initiated into Philosophist before Neophyte and got a whole half body rash right after the initiation. They didn't go away for months.
Wow. Yeah, that's one. Yeah, that's that. I remember something happened. It was just a logistical issue, you know, like needing officers for rituals, and something happened where I needed to stand as Carrix for a ritual.
That's my favorite officer role.
Yeah, you got to be like a juggler, well, especially in the neophyte. But I actually don't think it was a neophyte. I forget what ritual it was now. But I had to stand as Carrix. We needed a Carrix. But I was going to be taking my practicus that same day, later that day. And at least in my mind, you shouldn't be holding that office until you're a practicus. So I was holding that scepter and I was doing that work, even though it was the same day. I had not yet taken the right initiation, and I swear it bit me. My entire arm just went numb all the way from the hand all the way up to the shoulder. So yeah, I sometimes you got to take that seriously, depending on the spirits involved and how they're going to react to things. So
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. When I became an adept and the other guy who became adept around the same time as me, Martin, he runs Zaleski's order now up in Montreal, right? Um,
mhm.
we changed things. Talked to the adept above us. The other adept had just left, so there was only three of us now. Three Aquarians running the Temple of Tahuti, which had been founded by a Virgo, run by a Virgo and a Gemini, and then passed on to us three Aquarians. The adepts after me consisted of a Libra and a Gemini. That's it. And those are all the adepts that went through Temple Tahuti, I believe. Oh, I'm forgetting
Wow.
one. I'm forgetting a Taurus. Forgetting a Taurus. But she was
Okay,
American, so
let's say
she
that's
doesn't
a
count.
lot of air.
Yeah, well, Temple of Duty, Temple of the Word, and we were a hardcore group. It was really fun. It was a time of my life, and we did institute. We said to him, "How do we start doing these initiations just for one person?" And our imperator was like, "That might mean we have to do three some nights. If we have three neophytes joining this month, then that means on this Saturday we do three initiations. Are you
You
up for
do
that?"
three
And we were
initiations.
like,
That's right.
"Hell yeah!" Zinc won't let us have jobs anymore. So what else are we meant to do?
Oh, good Lord.
That's why I went to grad school, because it would let me keep a job and keep calling me to do things like,
Wow.
you have to quit your job and do this, drive down to LA, drive down to Seattle, do this. It's like, okay, I'm going back to school
Jeez.
because I'm not gonna use with school. They wouldn't do pull that shit. Well, then of course they
Right.
tried to, and then a bunch of adepts left because they were so outraged by how I was being treated, and then eventually I left. So, say lovey. There you go.
All's well that ends well, I
We
suppose.
we talked about a bunch of that stuff offline, which is
Yeah.
why you're not so shocked by any of it, right? But anyway, we did start doing initiations just for the people, and it was great. It was a really good idea, I think. Then, unfortunately, the Hierophant after me was a Gemini and refused to memorize any of his lines, and it just fell apart after that. And so,
Yeah, we in our temple we're not big on memorizing everything. There's some prayers and stuff like when we get up to do the prayer of Osiris at the end. We always like to have that memorized. I think there's a few that don't, but most of us do. But our thing is because we're the mother temple, we have so many people coming through all the time that we just really can't memorize every single ritual. So yeah, we'll carry scripts around through a lot of it.
I've got nothing against needing a script. It's like what I always would tell people is like, yes, you must memorize your lines. However, if you do not have your lines memorized, make sure you have your script. don't
Yeah,
like
make sure you have
don't
it.
be like
Yeah.
go in there and hope for the best. Maybe it'll just the spirits will tell it to me. No, we want
No.
this thing to go
Well, we
smoothly.
focus on a lot is and we really need to get back to it. Of course, pandemic and everything, it's a lot got shut down. But we're starting to get kind of powered back up again. But what we used to do was drilling. And it's not so much memorizing the lines, but it's getting everyone to know where to go in the temple and how to move and how to not trip over each other. And at this point in the ritual, you need to be over here, and be ready for what's about to happen at this next point in the ritual. And there's a lot of stage direction, blocking is what is what it would be called in theater. And when even if it's not memorizing the lines, if by drilling on that and getting all of that to go smooth, that just makes so much of a difference, because you can really tell when folks come into the temple that they don't really practice that blocking, and they're not really used to working in a full temple, and they'll go the wrong way, or they'll trip over or run into other people or knock things over or be in the wrong place at the wrong time, or miscues. I guess I'm sounding like a director right now, but there's a lot of stagecraft that goes into actually running a full lodge style ritual. And so that's what we focused on a lot, and we'll focus on again once we get back up and running.
Yeah, rehearsals were when you committed to a 6 month term as an officer at our temple, it was a big commitment. It meant usually like 2-3 nights a week for the elemental initiation of the month. Because you do them under the sign of the zodiac that they're in, right? That's how we did them. I don't know if that's actually normal Golden Dawn practice, but
No, it's
it
not.
was a
No,
really
we
helpful.
can't do that because again, because we're the mother temple. I mean, we have to do the rituals when people can come here. If someone's
Mm,
flying from London for an initiation, we're not going to be able to time that to the astrology all the time. But the
yeah.
Golden Dawn itself wasn't really big on that.
No, we just
um
did it as an administrative thing. Like, when we were
yeah,
an air sign, we did each month there was an elemental initiation. And when was it? It was the one of the sign that we were in. And then, of course, every month
fine,
we also
sure.
had to do a neophyte for whatever members we had joining. But originally we only did one neophyte for all the members that were joining. And that could go up to here in Vancouver, that I think the most we ever did was probably 5 to 10 people. Because
Hmm.
that's still a lot of people. But we were
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
we grew very large very fast. Anyway, but yeah, it's a lot of practice to rehearse these initiations and ceremonies if you want to do them well. So that's it's a did you have a favorite officer role? Do you have?
Hmm.
Yeah, I told you mine.
I think I feel most comfortable in the Hierophant position, because I just kind of have this. It's hard sometimes. This impetus to, like, I don't want to say control things, but, like, I just went on and on about blocking and making sure that people are moving right and stuff in the ritual. And it's hard for me. Like, let's say I'm out in the hall as one of the officers there. it's even then, it's hard for me not to say, okay, everyone stand up. Okay, no, everyone needs to sit down. Hey, you know, you need to go over here. You know, so I'm always like trying to, you know, keep things running smoothly. And it's almost like it's almost like a bad habit I can't stop.
Is your
You
Mars
know?
yeah, is your Mars in Capricorn as well?
No, it's really not. I'm not really sure where that comes from. It might even be the Saturn in my can because Saturn, my sun and Saturn are both in Cancer. Um, but I don't,
Wait, you're
yeah,
not a
it's
Capricorn?
no, my right. Well, I am a Capricorn, but that's because my ascendant is Capricorn. Your ascendant is your actual sign. That's what you actually are. So
I'll
yes,
tell my
my
mom that.
ascendant is Capricorn. My sun is Cancer, and my moon is
Oh,
Sagittarius.
mm.
I'm trying to remember where my Mars is at the moment, but I can't. I want to say Pisces, but I'm thinking that's my daughter's chart. So yeah, I don't remember where my Mars is. Leo, maybe?
Why is it you would
Ah, I'll look
consider
it.
your
I'll look.
ascendant your actual sign?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Why would you consider your ascendant to be your actual sign?
Because, well, in comparison to your sun sign is just your outer personality. It's just the part of you you show to the world. Just like the moon, your moon sign is your inner personality, the part that you tend to keep to yourself. But your ascendant colors everything in the chart. Everything is like I'm Capricorn, so my sun is in Cancer, so it's a Capricorn Cancer,
Mm.
and my moon is Sagittarius. It's a Capricorn Sagittarius.
That's a
So
very
every, you know,
it's a very different
so,
interpretive model than I was raised with. My mom's an astrologer, so I was raised with this tropical astrology, Hellenistic astrology, and I've never heard these interpretations before. Are they more sidereal or Jyotish?
no, it's Renaissance astrology.
Just okay. Interesting,
Same
really
stuff
cool.
Christopher Warnock
Very
teaches.
cool.
I'm not saying I got that from his teachings, but
Yeah.
it's the same stuff.
Yeah, I've
I
been
forget
meaning to look
exactly
into what he's
which
up
source
to.
I got it from, but
Yeah,
yeah, for
I like it.
a very long time I've considered the ascendant to be the actual sign.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
So okay, I was almost gonna ask you other than Hierophant, because like it's like why I didn't ask you which is your favorite initiation in general,
Mm.
because obviously it's 5-6, right? Like,
Hmm.
like
Well, you said
so,
Golden Dawn. You didn't say RRAC,
because
so
I'm
I was
because I was
strictly
being
Golden
smart with the
Dawn.
higher with the officer question. My judgment lapsed, and I didn't say except other than Hierophant. So other than Hierophant, what's your
Oh,
favorite officer role that you've been or seen?
no,
Or
probably Hyrus,
you like Hierophant? Eh?
because
Oh, it's a fun
because
one,
you're
right?
because as Hyrus, you're still in charge of the hall. you're, you're the second in command of the to the
All
but
right. You like being in charge. I get it.
but no, I mean, yeah, really, I mean, I kid, but I do have that impetus to want to, make sure everything's being run right. But I also like Hires because it's a very active role. I kind of like what I like about most Golden Dawn ceremonies is that you're kind of active no matter what role you're in. You're never just not doing anything. Even the Stylistes and the Duhos have good, you feel like you're up and doing stuff. But the Hyrus really feels like he's the most active in the hall. And I guarantee you there's a million people going, wait, Carrick's, he's the juggler and everything. And he really is. But the Hyrus is the one that does the banishing ritual, and the Hyrus is the one that anchors the when you're opening the hall and the higher, the first the Hyrus stands up and explains his office, and then the Hierophant stands up and explains his office, and you're actually creating this energy between the east and the west, and the Hyrus has to anchor that. And I mean, there's just so much about his role. In
It's
fact,
awesome. I
now that
got
I
to do
really think
Hyrus
about it,
once in
say that
Portal.
again.
I got to do Hyrus once in Portal for 6 months, and then I believe once in 5-6 I got to do Hyrus for 6 months. And there's nothing cooler than getting to do some lesser, different officer roles as an adept. Obviously, they want you on the dais, especially in a small temple. But it was yeah, Hyrus is so much fun. Just
Yeah. Well, it's good to have second order members in all the offices if you can get it,
yeah,
because the second order officers will know what the god forms are supposed to look like, and there's a lot of stuff that they don't teach you until you get into the inner order that's going on the astral in those outer order rituals. And I remember the first time I sat down. In fact, I was on the dais, but I didn't hold any office. I wasn't, I was a brand new initiate into the second order. And I think they just had enough officers to fill everything. So they stuck me on in like the past Hierophant seat or something. It was really just a placeholder. But for the very first time, they handed me the adept script for the rituals. And that was, I that feeling of getting to see that for the very first time. And not just see it on the paper, but I'm watching the actual ritual being performed, but I'm being told what's going on and on all these other different levels that I had never seen before. So I'm getting this whole new light show of a ritual and that was just an incredible experience. So yeah, if you can get all of your officers to have that inner order knowledge, that's definitely desirable.
If you can get a dozen or so adepts at every temple, that's nice.
Yeah, right.
It's nice. Not a bad thing at all. Um, very cool. Yeah, because we're from like obviously like we're sort of from the Regardi lineage, you could say, and obviously you more than I, because I'm from what group. Um, but we didn't use the different god forms for every initiation that, of course, we found out were being used in the original order when Zaleski published that the Fade-Ra data, right? Did you guys ever update the god forms to different god forms and having like the Hyruses become it takes on Samael in some of the initiations? When I found out about that, I was like, why aren't we using this? And they're like, oh, because it's Stella Matutina. I'm like, we're literally called the Hermetic Order of the Morning Star in America. In Canada, we were HOGD, of course, because the government had no problem with that. And why not? I always thought that Hermetic Order of the Morning Star was the way cooler name and represented more who we were than the defunct order, and also at the same time they're like, yeah, but Cicero uses Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, so we should use Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And that might sound strange. Some people listening might be strange, find that strange for me to be saying that. However, those people probably aren't aware that at all the day C's I attended at Corpus Christi, the adept get together, we got adepts get together every year. Chick came on a conference call with us and talked to us. So when I was a young adept, I thought everything was like simpatico, and there was never any vitriol as far as I knew between us and Cicero at all. The problem was Griffin was attacking everyone. Like I said to you earlier off the record, like he broke into our temple, which consequently led to the role of sentinel being much more in demand when people realized that there were some nut jobs out there that actually would try and break into our temple during an initiation and disrupt it, and they would actually have to potentially use force with a sword against disruptors like David Griffin. And the only reason our sentinel, she told me, technically a Fulax, I guess, but I think that name is in question in Golden Dawn history, but whatever. She told me we're still in touch. The only reason she didn't actually use force on him is because it's Canada. So David Griffin wouldn't be alive today had our temple been in America, because he broke in and assaulted her and tried to get into our temple during a neophyte initiation. So how can that guy claim anything other than a demonic desire to destroy everything that all of us have worked so hard to preserve? He's a brutal guy. But after that, people were like, Sentinel's hardcore, because we had a huge claymore that one of our blacksmith members made. It was so heavy, I could barely hold it. It was huge.
Wow.
You had to, and she had it up against his throat, like, get the fuck out. Of course, then all 50 members came out of the temple. Even the Dias officers, like, what's going on? We'd never had initiation interrupted before. But there's David Griffin, right, trying to push past her and a sword blade at his chest, and we forced him out.
And the worst I've seen in 20 years, over 20 years now, was some lady that walked into the house. She was going to a party, and she just I don't even know where the party was, but she just saw the house with all the cars and just walked, and someone had forgotten to lock the back door. And she just walked in. What's going on? And we're all in there and all this Masonic, and
she was just
nemesis. Is this the party? No,
Can you
sir, you
imagine?
walked in the wrong house.
Can
This
you
is not the
imagine
party you. It's a party, but not the party you looking for.
oh my God, that person,
That's the worst that's happened to us. We've never had anybody try to.
dude, that's
Yeah,
way more funny than anything I've ever heard of.
yeah, just waltz right in.
You're
Poor
going to
lady.
a party and you're like walking into a Golden Dawn temple by accident.
It's like I think maybe I didn't understand the invitation when I decided to come to this party, but I'm gonna nope right on out of here.
Yeah, she was just in the wrong place, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah, like I said, I don't even know what house she was trying to go to. We didn't know her. I mean, it was just she saw a house with a bunch of cars and the door was open. Looked like a party.
Oh, that's too funny.
Oh man.
It's too funny. Yeah. Yeah, it's such a interesting I don't even know. Priesthood. Want to talk about priesthood?
Mm.
So
Okay.
let's go into it. Let's just talk like people think that priests or ordination often creates an ontological change. Like the traditional teaching is there's an ontological change in someone who was ordained to the priesthood. Same as there is. This is we're talking
Okay.
traditional Roman. We're going to start with the Roman Catholics because they're the ones with their own country. Um,
Okay. Their own
and
empire.
so baptism's an ontological change, ordination to the priesthood's another ontological change, and then the super saiyan final ontological change would be the bishopric, right? And
Well, unless you're elected pope,
I guess so. That
that's
probably
when you
would count as
become.
one. But for example, things like archbishop is administrative. It's not considered ontological or anything like that. And I think, of course, if you study philosophy, you might come to the conclusion that the
Yeah,
idea
makes
of any
sense.
kind of ontological change, which means change at the source of who you are, a fundamental change to the basic nature of your being, setting you apart from the nature of other people. I generally do not like the idea of ontological changes at all. I don't generally like the idea of ontotheology at all, the idea that there's a single primary source and you're either right or you're wrong and there's no two ways about it. I think that kind of thinking has many problems. I can't disprove it, of course, or anything. That's not even what the philosophical project when it comes to, this is about. But it does shape how we understand what it means to be a priest or to be ordained or even to be baptized in this life. And there's a big confusion that people have that if you don't do things a proper way, it doesn't occur, right? But a lot
Hmm.
of the times people don't realize that proper way of things being done is different tradition to tradition. So then you have competing valuations of what is true and what is less than true. So someone on Facebook's asking you, "Oh, well, you're ordained, but were you given the Eucharist?" Which, as soon as I saw the
Right.
question, I was like, "This is the stupidest thing I have ever
That
heard."
was I mean, well, the thing is, when you get questions like that, especially online, and it wasn't just that statement, it was other verbiage that particular questioner was using in the conversation you're referring to here was it's they're leading questions. The idea is they're probing, they're looking for something that they can pick apart. They're looking to pick a fight, and that's just not what any of this is about. That's not it's like I said in a comment in that thread, as I said, this is what it's jackassery like this that gives, priests, lodge magicians, ceremonial magicians. I mean, just everyone on this whole side, Martinists, Masons. I mean, everyone on this kind of side of the esoteric aisle. We have this horrible reputation, and that kind of jackassery is the source of it. It's like I'm gonna come over and basically take out my penis and start waving it around and demand for you to take yours out and wave it around too, or else. And that's just a game I absolutely refuse to play, and I will never play. And I made it very clear in that conversation, and it's a message that I want to get out there. Someday Chick won't be with us. Someday even Tabitha, will leave and that'll leave us, that'll leave me, that'll leave my wife, that'll leave the other adepts in our temple. And you know what happens when the leader of an order passes away. You know what's coming. An avalanche of absolute BS. Suddenly people claiming they knew them who never met them. People claiming they knew things about them that, you know, I mean, it's just going to come. I know it's coming. And for me, it's very important in that case and in other cases, you know, as our generation gets older and more of our elders are about to start passing over that bridge, you know, and I will not play that my initiation is bigger than your initiation. You know, my warrant has better ink on it than your warrant. I mean, that is just such absolute missing the point nonsense. You know, that is the exact opposite of doing the capital W work. And I will absolutely never have any part of that, you know. So
It was a very sad thing for me, actually. That's why you saw me jump to some people would probably see me as coming to your aid, which is certainly not the case. I was just infuriated to see this person who is another chief of a Golden Dawn temple, not the order I was in, not the order you are in, but a different order and a highly regarded order, I think. And worse than that status, he's a Gnostic priest as well, though I don't recall what lineage. But worse than all of that, he was a student of mine over 20 years ago. So to see someone that I taught, you know, back when I was a young adept, succeed to being the head of a temple in a major, like, you know, Zaleski's order is very well regarded, at least in lineage, if not in functionality these days, though I don't know because I have no personal knowledge of it these days. But to see him speak out and treat you that way over your ordination, which is as valid an ordination, I think, as any under God, and trying to test you like this testy language of like, yeah, but did you get the Eucharist? Because if you didn't get the Eucharist, then you're maybe not or like, what the fuck are you talking about? You fucking.
And if I had answered yes, I got the Eucharist, it would have been the next thing. The goalpost would keep moving.
It's
and that's how this works.
Questioning.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, well, you got the Eucharist, but was it, you know, this kind of Eucharist, or was it done in this particular way? And then after we hashed all that out, it would have been the next thing, and then the next. It never would have been good enough, which is why I won't go down that road.
Good,
because you know, between you and me, and I, of course, now, you know, who knows how many people are listening, but you know, privately, because
7,000.
you didn't walk up to me in public and demand the information from me, I'm happy to say, of course, there was a Eucharist at my ordination. Who wouldn't be given the Eucharist at their ordination? Why would you even ask me that? There's only one reason to ask me that, is because you're trying to pick a fight. And it's like, and
trying
I've
to
said this
invalidate
before,
your ordination in
to,
the eyes of the world because it was on Facebook.
exactly.
Everyone was watching. I couldn't believe my eyes. And when I looked at his line of logic,
for what?
For what reason? For what
know?
reason?
I mean, if I'm running out there defrauding people and I'm a problem, then absolutely call me on my BS, challenge me, you know. But what have I done that made this guy come? And it's not even me. You know what? Let's take I out of it. And I think I said this to you at the time, was that it's not even me you're calling into question, because I'm open about my ordination. I posted a picture of my bull of ordination, and I did that because I offer services to people that require an ordained priest to do. So I think they have a right to see my bull of ordination. Okay. And I'm open. You can see the name of my church. You can see the name of who initiated me. I don't have to share any of that with anybody.
No.
So when I show that bull and you see that Chick Cicero was the bishop who ordained me, and you immediately start asking me, well, did you do this? Did he do that? You're not calling my legitimacy into question. You're calling his. What has Chick Cicero done to make you think he may be somehow illegitimate? This man has done more for the Western esoteric community than anyone in probably the past several hundred years. Golden Dawn, Masonry, they're now, you know, he and his wife, right? Really, it's really Tabitha and him. Tabitha's leading the way on refounding the SRIA, which, by the way, is where my church comes from. You know, they're doing all of this work, and they have published all of these books and this entire library of resources, and they have spread temples around the world, and they have dedicated their lives. And try as hard as some people might, no one's been able to get any real controversy. There are no Cicero victims to point to, no one who's been harmed by them, no one who's, no one has been, they've never been arrested for anything, or, and these have been just good people who've done hard, thankless work for their entire lives. Why would this person come to me and start questioning whether Chick Cicero is legitimate? So that's why I mentioned Chick before, and that he'll be gone someday and not there to defend himself. And I am flabbergasted that someone would call his legitimacy into question. Like, you believe that, he runs he founded the modern Golden Dawn. None of us would be doing Golden Dawn without Chick Cicero at all. I mean, I don't care what lineage you come from, none of us would be here if he had not laid the foundation. And no one questions his legitimacy there. And he is a very high ranking Mason, and I have not seen a single Mason ever question his legitimacy as a Mason or the offices that he holds there. And I could go on with the list, and it's not my place to do so, but my point is,
Yeah.
why all these things that he does, and he is solid there? But as soon as I say on Facebook that he is a bishop in a lineage, and I won't list out my entire lineage past Chick, because that's not your business, and it's not my business to reveal that lineage. But I will tell you that Chick is my initiator. We'll have that discussion, because you were talking about ontology, but we'll talk about that later. But he is the one who ordained me, so it's his legitimacy that somehow, in this one instance, is in question. I mean, do you think, Chick Cicero sent me a home ordination kit through the mail? Do you think he called me up by phone and went, "Yeah, hey, you're ordained, congratulations"? No, I don't think so. So
you know that River, River the Nematon?
the what now?
Do you know who River the Nematon is? He's a YouTuber,
No.
occultist. He's actually very good at Jewish Kabbalah. Like, anytime I need to brush up on the difference between like
Oh,
Zaire Anpin and Arik Anpin, I check out his videos. It was like, okay, good, because he really loves the Zahar and all that. It's great. So he's good.
that's cool. I have
On
to
his
look him
live
up.
stream the other day, he did the Universal Life Church, and now his YouTube handle is like got Reverend in the title. He was very
Reverend.
open about it. He's now Reverend River because of the Universal Life Church. It's like, why not? But he was very open.
I had that for a while. Yeah.
Whatever. The problem with this person, this Golden Dawn chief and priest, questioning your ordination in the way he was, for me, wasn't so much that he was questioning Chick, though I'm really glad to hear you explain what that was like for you, because Chick's obviously has such a major role in your life personally, in all our lives indirectly, but in your life very personally, right? Like, he's your godparent to your kids, right? If I'm not incorrect. I don't know. Most of what I know from
he
you
wasn't
comes off.
godparent, but he was actually the one that christened my daughter. Yeah.
Amazing. So the problem with questioning your ordination based on questioning Chick is that theologically, what this fellow was doing wasn't actually questioning Chick. He was questioning Jesus in terms of biblical theology. That's what he was questioning. So when I was in seminary, I had lots of classmates who were already ordained. Why? Because they came from traditions where ordination comes by charism of the Holy Spirit. So if they're in their church and it turns out their gift is the word, and they speak and they're ordained, it's like, oh, all of a sudden the church is like, they all stand up. You're ordained now. Oh my God. And then that kid is like, well, you can go to seminary and get a master's of divinity so you have some skills to work with, or not. You don't have to. So I had classmates who were already ordained. They weren't in seminary to get ordained. They were there to learn they were there to water the seeds of that charism that came from the Holy Spirit, because all sacraments are performed by Christ except for the marriage sacrament, in which they're all performed by the priest standing in for Christ, except for the marriage sacrament, in which the couple stands in for Christ, and the priest actually isn't necessary in Catholic theology. Because if two people in Catholic theology just start shagging and shack up together. They're considered married by Jesus.
They're married.
Yeah, they're married.
Yeah.
You're married. And if you want to then marry someone else and the church finds out about that first little thing, you have to get it annulled. Even if you were just common.
Oh, see, I didn't know that. I've never heard
Oh
of that
yeah.
one.
Well, I learned the good shit when I went to school. So like, you know,
Wow.
I wish I actually had I don't have any ordination certificates, but I've had too many ordinations to count. What I did get was the Master of Divinity. And so that was my take. That was my way of my the thing I realized, like, if this guy was going to talk the shit he was talking publicly to you, and this is an ex-student of mine, you know, I was like, okay, let me show you how absurd this is, right? You're claiming an ordination and comparing your ordination to Father Brother Leitch's here, but you don't have any education, right? So why don't I declare you invalid, right? It's all, and once you start doing that, you just see how nonsensical that whole way of thinking is. And he didn't say shit after I talked, and you just did a little face, like, oh shit, when I wrote that comment. You're like, oh, and it was over. It was over. And it should be over because it was bullshit. He was talking theological nonsense and he was being a petty douchebag. And I'm embarrassed to say this because I've always really liked this guy. And there's people in his order who are there because I recommended them join it. Right. And so it's like, what are you doing? What are you actually doing? Because there's very few of us around, us GD people like you and me and him. Why are we doing this vitriol and this petty narcissistic bullshit?
It is a little strange, you know. I do question, and I say not question in the negative sense. I mean, like, I actually wonder what his motivations were. You know, like, even the order that he comes from, you know, there sometimes you get hostilities between orders, you know, things happen. People are people. But you know, like, my order doesn't have any hostilities, you know, with his order. So it's like, I'm not sure where it seemed to be kind of a confrontational attitude, and I'm not sure where that was generated from, you know. He mentioned that in the confrontation, he mentioned that there's this problem with uh people just kind of, I guess, ordaining anybody anywhere. You know, you're ordained, you're ordained, you're ordained. Everybody gets to be ordained, and then just sending people out calling themselves priests and priestesses or whatever without any actual, you know, training, or without actually doing any of the work, or, you know.
But what
And
Jesus didn't care about that,
I
right?
don't understand why he would think that, you know, of me and Chick Cicero of all people, you know, in the community. It baffles me why, you know, what he's seen or heard of me that makes him go, no, this guy doesn't know what he's doing or what he's talking about. So, but if that's how he feels, you know, there are people out there, you know, there are people out there who just do not feel that I have the slightest clue what I'm talking about. And that, you know, that's fine. You know, I can't, you know, they say if you don't piss anybody off, then you aren't making any changes. You know, you're not, you know, like you pointed out, I write things about Enochian magic that have literally never been published before, and that tends to step on toes of other authors who have published before, and those authors sometimes don't like me for publishing these things, you know. So yeah, I do get ire sometimes. I do get people who dislike me, but in this particular conversation you're describing, I really have no idea of the source. I had no prior, you know, encounters with the guy that I remember that were negative, or it was just a very strange stance for him to take, right out of the gate, you know.
I assumed you knew him pretty well because he's pretty well known in the Golden Dawn world. But so therefore,
But
brother,
not
the
like
biggest,
directly, like he and I knew each other, you know what I'm saying? It was just, we knew of each other, but yeah, it was just very strange.
The biggest burn for him in this situation is the fact that you don't really know even who he is.
Well, you know, I mean, again, I'm not trying to say he's nobody. I don't know who he is. I'm just saying that we were not. We had not had many. You know, we had not had encounters.
All my memories of him are as a lovely guy. He's got a great reputation as a very moral and ethical guy. And so I was very surprised.
And I can't. And I, you know, and I'm only talking about the conversation, not the person, because I don't know him as a person. For all I know, he's a great guy. I don't know what his motivation was. I don't know what he saw in me or what I was saying that made him suspicious, but he was suspicious.
it,
And I refused to play along. I would not even tell him if I had a Eucharist at my ordination. I just, because there was another person in the same thread who had started before him. Just very prying questions, and
yeah.
I tried to be nice at first, and just not answer, but be kind of funny about it. And they pushed, and I was just like, oh, then it's none of your effing business. There's your answer, because I'm not playing your game. And I think he kind of came in the middle of that, and maybe that was it. Maybe he just got the wrong idea or something. I don't know.
What would you say? Like, imagine how that would go down. What if you had happened to be ordained in a tradition that doesn't acknowledge the Eucharist? Right? What do you do with that? Like, people forget, we get so locked into our own way of doing things and our own sense of what the tradition is, we completely become myopic about the fact that there's other ways of doing things. And I'm sure
Yeah.
we're obviously all guilty of this, because we all have we all focus on what we focus on. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I even fall for it from time to time,
it's hard not to, right? When you're, especially when you're
Yeah.
researching things that take so much concentration and focus, it's easy. Then you hear something else and you're like, oh, that's nonsense. But then you're like, wait, that's only nonsense because I haven't stopped reading about the Shem HaMephoresh and for a year. Let me think, like, let me think out of the
And
box.
what happens to me a lot too, and this is a lot of the reason why I love the Solomonic group, is because like someone will post something in there, and just my first, because like you said, and it's not about study, but in this case it's about practice. You have your practice and you're used to doing things a certain way, maybe the way your spirits want you to do it. So someone will post something and your very first reaction is, no, this is wrong, you got it all wrong. And you got to stop yourself. And if I do that, if I stop myself and I wait for others, Joseph Peterson might respond, and Stephen Skinner might respond, and Adam Jonathan might respond, and then they'll have their own unique takes on it, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I remember this grimoire over here, it says this, and then and then it's like, oh, thank God I didn't respond in my own first knee-jerk myopic way, because there was 10 things that I knew a decade ago and had long since forgotten that these guys are bringing back up, and I realized I would have been wrong if I had just posted and said, been dismissive, and so
Yeah,
it's very important to get these other views. I don't think this subject is so big, I don't think it'd be contained in one person's head. It takes all of us. And like I said, because of the scholarship and the way new books keep coming out, and I don't mean newly written books, I mean old books that are discovered and translated for the first time, and the way it keeps changing everything. So it's yeah, it's easy to get caught in a myopic view and trip over yourself when you do it. So it's good to keep an idea open, because like you said, there are traditions that don't use the Eucharist. And I was even being dismissed. I mean, I fell for it myself, right? Because I just said to you a few minutes ago, of course there was a Eucharist at my ordination. What kind of an idiot would think that there wasn't a Eucharist at my ordination? So there I was doing it. There could be people listening that are going,
tradition.
hey, there wasn't a Eucharist at my ordination. So
Yeah,
yeah, you make very good points there. And you also made a good point, and you're not the only one, by the way, who contacted me privately after that public conversation went down and made that point about the gifts of the Holy Spirit, and that if God chooses you, you're chosen, and
yeah,
there's no person on earth that can say otherwise. There was nobody ordained Moses, nobody ordained Jonah. You know, God just said, "Look, I got this job that needs done, and you're the lucky bastard that it's in the right time and place to do it." And yeah, and you see that a lot in like some of the folk traditions, like in hoodoo and hexcraft and stuff. It's you 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 earn your place in those traditions through your natural talent, not through some other person telling you that, or God forbid, getting into the lodge systems again, giving you a warrant or an initiation certificate. Those things, man, those are the bane of our tradition. Those damn pieces of paper. Yeah, so it's Yeah, yes, I was ordained and I was ordained properly. Yes, there was Eucharist at my ordination, all of that nice stuff. But had none of that happened, the only reason I was ordained, it was like on a whim. And I don't mean the ritual, I mean the decision to ordain me. I had been thinking for a while about seeking it. It was churning in the back of my mind of maybe that's the way I should go. And then one day, two members of our temple came to me and wanted me to marry them, wanted me to officiate. And I mentioned earlier, I had the Universal Life Church thing. I had the certificate. So I was like, yeah, sure, absolutely, I'll do it. And Chick was sitting there and he said, well, why don't I ordain you so you can, actually do it right? And so I was like, right there, it was like a light switch went in my head, and all the wondering if maybe I should do it just fell away. And I went, yes, let's do this. So,
Wonderful.
I mean, yeah, it's so, I mean, and the reason I told that story was because that's the only reason I finally went through with it. It was never to me necessary that if I don't do this, I'm not, ontologically proper to do the work that I'm doing. You know what I'm saying? I
Yeah.
just felt it felt right for me to do it, but it never felt like, oh, you know, you're not, because I did Abramelin, which is basically a method of making you a prophet. And of course, I'm in the inner order. I'm 5/6 in the Golden Dawn, and I considered those ordinations of a type, initiations, and like before I was ordained, I considered my 5/6 in that ceremony we talked about, that 5/6 ritual. I considered that my ordination. So yeah, to me, it's always been a magical and a practical thing. And then just taking an actual ordination was just a personal step for me. It's what I felt I needed to do. It felt right for me. So
And most, I think I can actually say this quite confidently, that most, and I mean that, most theology would see the ceremonial ordination as an enactment, a confirmation of the initial impetus which comes from the Holy Spirit. You're either called to ordination or you're not. When I started seminary, I was Roman
or you're not.
Catholic
Yeah.
actually, and I was about to get married. So what am I doing? Well, I was planning on joining the married diaconate. Then after a year,
Mm.
the new marriage wasn't going so well. Probably due to the fact that I was in school all day, every day, and then at the Golden Dawn Temple all night, every night. Not much time for the lady,
Wow.
for the new bride.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I thought she understood the deal going in, but you're young. I was 23, so you know the the what was that? Don't lose it. Don't lose it. Don't lose it. Oh, so I talked to my teachers. I talked to my Archbishop Adam Exner and the Roman Catholic Archbishop, and I talked to my spiritual director, who was a bishop in the Anglican Church, and we all talked. And someone said, "Why doesn't he read Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis?" And then we'll talk again. So they had me read it, and it was cool to see the Anglican, which for you Americans, Episcopalian, same thing, same church, same communion. In fact, it's not just a different
Yep.
name. It's not a different name because it's a different group. It's the same group. People don't realize that
It's the
sometimes
same group.
Anglicans and Episcopalians are within the same communion. And so it was cool to see the Roman Catholic Archbishop, this old Austrian man who spoke English with an Irish accent because he learned English from a Father O'Donoghue, which was adorable because like
Oh,
old
that's
Austrian
funny.
Archbishop. And I tell you no, that the reason the Holy Spirit comes down, he's like, and that is why, it's this weird mixture of Austrian, German, English with Irish accent. It was like, what
Oh,
the
that's
fuck is going on?
hilarious.
He was a lovely archbishop. He did maybe occasionally get drunk and throw bottles at priests, but we all are imperfect in our own ways.
Mm.
I don't want people to think that I'm a papist, so I'm just going to give that little bit of yeah, human beings. We're all human beings. My other bishop talked to that bishop. They're like, I read that book and I was like, you know what? I could be an Anglican. It would probably be easier. And my bishop was like, look, the fact is, you have a vocational calling to ordination, whether that's diaconate or priestly, not really an issue. I'm like, so I should become an Anglican deacon. They're like, well, no. They're like, no, because now that if you're going Anglican now with us, which was a process, of course, it meant instead of going to mass every day at noon, I went to Anglican worship every morning at 7 a.m. before classes. Smart call, hey?
Right. Nice and fresh and
It was a lot of work, but you're
bright
paying
and
so much
bushy
money for it,
tailed.
you have to show up. Like if I missed my bus, man, I would pay
Wow.
$50 for the cab because it was costing me $50 an hour to be in seminary, like a class to be in, you know.
Wow.
So it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
you know, just you know, anyway. So, you know, I went Anglican. They're like, no, you may as well be a full priest now. I'm like, I think the diaconate's more for me. And maybe I would have been right because I never did get ordained in the Anglican church. I went on to doctoral studies instead, but I fucking loved going through the experience. And I wish I had sort of actually stayed on the diaconate track because I probably would have been able to get ordained then in the Anglican church and then just gone off as an academic priest. But there was a big push 20 years ago when I did this to not ordain priests who were going to be scholars, which I think is a mistake that the Anglican Church is making. It's a mistake the Roman Catholic Church certainly does not make. They do not. They love having ordained academic PhDs, but the Anglican Church is like, they were like, you can be ordained, but we're sending you up north to northern British Columbia, and if you don't know what that means, boy, I tell you what, it's not a walk in the park, you know. Northern British Columbia is not for beginners. And I was like, I don't want to go do that. I want to go to Lampeter and do my PhD with Nicholas Goodrick Clark at Lampeter. Then he moved to Exeter. But anyway, so I ended up not following that through. Of course, I did. My favorite ordination is by Granny Rainbow in the Fellowship of Isis. You know, that's the one I'm gonna that's the one that counts in my opinion. And that just happened just the other year, you know. But she's my favorite.
Wow.
And she was, you know, a student of Paul Foster Case. And you know, I think she just passed, but no one's talking to me there anymore. So anyway, I'm glad we got to talk about priesthood, man. This is awesome. And we had time to dive
like
into,
I said, highly controversial, and see, what do we talk about? A controversy.
Yeah. It's great. It's great work. Yeah, I'm curious to dive into a bit of we have time, yeah. I'd like to dive into Enochian a bit more, like properly, if that's okay with you. Yeah. So I first started, my first introduction to the Enochian system was as a young adept in 2000 in the order, and we were working with the Benorum angels of the Heptarchia. But of course, we were fixing all of Dee's mistakes, so we lined up all the princes and the kings to be of the same planet, right? And after that, the next step was corresponding them, of course, to the stations of the cross.
That's interesting.
Doesn't sound familiar to you probably at all, but this is what I was being taught, you know, because we were doing our own thing, right? And next thing you know, we were working on talismans and sending adepts with those talismans after consecrating them and working on them for a year in group work around at all our temples around the world. Then we sent a few adepts to Jerusalem to put them into the sacred places to help stop the war and the fighting and all of that. So that was my first introduction to Enochian outside of the basic liturgical stuff that we use to do the initiations and open the watchtowers and that sort of thing. And then, of course, like, you know, the call of the portal, SIRP, watchtower stuff.
Consecration of the fall.
Did you start studying Enochian before you got into the Golden Dawn, or because you got into the Golden Dawn?
Oh no, I was already mostly done with the angelical language volumes 1 and 2 before I got into the order.
Wow.
Yeah, I was working on that, and I think it was, I was working on that on my own because it was shortly after I got in the order that Llewellyn contacted me. It was a guy named Jim Garrison. He doesn't work there anymore, but he contacted me and asked me if I could write for them. And the first thing I offered him, I said, yeah, I've been working on this really awesome, you know, Enochian dictionary. It's actually 900 pages long. And he said, that sounds great. I said, but I'm also wanting to work on a book about the Grimoires. And he says, well, the Enochian book sounds great, but we really want the Grimoire book, if you can do that one. So I actually put the Enochian dictionary, the lexicon, on hold. And it was mostly done, but I had to put the finishing work on hold. And I spent 2 years writing Secrets of the Magical Grimoires because Llewellyn had asked for it first. And then I guess it was, well, that finally came out in 2005. there was like 2 or 3 years that it sat at the publisher before they finally released it. So it finally came out in 2005, and I'm now forgetting the years that all the Enochian books came out. But those actually, I mean, I must have worked on those things for 10 years or something before I finally published them. And that was, I'd only been in the order maybe 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 years or so. So yeah, I was working on that stuff long before I got into the order.
So what sort of years are we talking about? Just out of curiosity, because again, I'm just a fan and curious.
Well, you got to figure I graduated high school in 92, moved out west. I would have been down in Denver by 93. So that's when I would have picked up my first Enochian book, because I actually remember it. I was at my girlfriend's apartment, and she had a roommate. And of course, everyone in our little group in Denver, we were all occultists and witches and stuff. So we were standing in her apartment. Her roommate was showing me all of his magic books, and he says, "Hey, in fiction stories and movies, whenever you see a magician and he's chanting something from a magic book, and he gets something wrong, and his head explodes, or he barfs up bullfrogs, or some kind of chaos ensues because he mispronounced a word." I was like, "Yeah." He says, "Yeah, this is where that comes from," and he handed me a book off of a shelf, and it was a Schuler book on Enochian magic. And yeah, you can hear
Let
the
me put on my
audience of children
serious
going,
Schuler, my serious study hat. This is the serious
right there
hat.
you go, right.
Now you know I'm
And
ready to
now
be a
now
serious
remember
magician
remember
studying
I
the
don't
Schulers.
know. Yeah, but you got to remember, I don't know anything at this point. I am just starting out on this stuff, right? I mean, I had maybe only been handed Don Craig's book a couple months before this, so I am green. So I pick up this Schuler book, and I open it up, and of course, first thing I see is all these wild names. And the guy had just told me this is the magic, that where you have to pronounce everything perfectly or else. And I look at these words, and it's like clearly unpronounceable, or it just seems unpronounceable words, and I'm like,
Yeah.
what the hell is this? And of course, there's all of these magical grids of letters and numbers, and it's like, if you want this angel, you've got to anagram the name this way, and if you want that angel, you got to take the same letters but anagram them, and all these elemental correspondences. Like, holy crap! I got to know about this. I got to learn about this. So that was my introduction. So I figure I joined the Golden Dawn in '98. So that was a good solid 5 years where I got from picking up my first Schuler book to actually working on the lexicon, trying to make sense of the language. And then I joined the order. And I think I was still kind of working on the lexicon when I joined the order.
That's so cool. Huh.
God, I can't believe I joined in '98. That sounds like it comes from a whole different timeline. It sounds like
It's
it
what the
sounds
kids.
ancient.
You're saying it wrong. You have to say it like the Zoomers are now saying it. You joined the Golden Dawn in the late 1900s.
In the late 1900s, yes. The late 20th century.
Yeah. I think
Because
that's
I'm old and ancient now.
yeah. Well, you've probably noticed I'm doing these diary reviews of mine on YouTube and stuff, and for my students, and reviewing my old diaries from the 90s. And it's been a trip. It's been a real eye opener actually, because they've been all wrapped in silk for 20 years.
Oh
You know,
wow. It's
so
so cool to look back on that old stuff.
the
I
shit I've
was really
seen.
bad. I've always been bad at keeping journals. Everyone says you keep your magical journal, and I've just been so bad at it. But what little I do keep and then I find again later, it's just like it's amazing to see it and how far you've come. And
Yeah.
it, yeah.
I did a lot of work in the 90s on Yeats's Celtic Mysteries, starting with contemplations of all the gods, development of sigils, scrying, then scrying to figure out colors for the god forms, then god form assumption plus invocation plus a little contact work and like automatic writing, then of the invocation from them. Those diaries unfortunately got taken and stolen. So
Oh
I'm going to recreate that
man.
work, but I do have my main order grade diaries from pre neophyte up through 5 6, so that's really cool. And that's what I'm just sort of doing little videos on them. Most of the videos are just for my main inner circle, students every week, but some of them I put up on YouTube just because I think it's interesting, and it's like, I don't know, I'm learning stuff as well, so it's pretty cool. But yeah, I hope people. I was always horrified by people who said you're meant to burn your diaries. It's the proper way, and I was like, well, then how do we have grimoires if that's the right thing?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It seems so selfish to me. Like if you're burning your diaries, I admit this is a bad thought, but sometimes when I was, a young student in the Golden Dawn, listening to other members talk and being like talking about you have to burn it, otherwise you're not hardcore. My thought was always, maybe you're burning your diaries because they suck.
I guess there's nothing useful in them.
Because that's where I put my greatest insights, my greatest experiences, and my greatest failures. The idea of eradicating that from existence to me seems like a betrayal of the entire tradition that I owe for what
Well, not only that, but I tell my students, like they'll come to me, like this happens with Abermelon all the time. They're several months in, and it's like, oh, I had this vision and I saw this and I experienced that and I got this message. What should I do? And the answer is always the same. You do nothing. You write it down in your journal. And then later on, after the rite is over, and maybe even years after the rite is over, you can come back to these journals and you might see where that vision you had was important, or the message you were given plays into something that happened to you in the years after. Maybe it'll be nothing. Maybe it's complete just gobbledygook coming out of your brain. And if so, it'll sit in your journal and just sit there and you'll never look at it again. But if it's meaningful, you'll be able to come back to it. So if I told my students to burn their journals, how could they ever come back to those things? How could they ever look back on those notes they kept? And that doesn't make any sense.
This one diary entry I went to when I first started looking at them during the early days of my podcast in COVID, I noticed some diary entries that at the time, meant nothing to me. And the reason they meant nothing to me, I realized, because I was raised by an astrologer mom in the New Age. I went my whole life in Waldorf school. I've been K through 12, never been to a public school. So I was around anthroposophists all the time. My main professor actually in high school was Dr. Idle Tim, whose doctoral dissertation in Hamburg in the 70s was called Yeats und Nietzsche. That was his PhD. So, when he saw me reading Levy and William Wynne Westcott, he would be like, oh, that's a good one. And I would be like, what the fuck? And, so next thing I know, like I'm at his house, like teaching me everything, looking at his books, and mentored by the guy for 4 years of high school. I essentially had a doctoral level mentorship before grade 12, which was really great. And he knew I joined the Golden Dawn during that time, right? So he gave me, and he had spent a lot of time with Yeats's daughter, during his dissertation years, because he was living in Ireland, playing as a guitarist singer in a Celtic band, of course, because that's what Germans do. It's true. It's true. Any Deutsch listeners here? Sie weiß, was ich meine. The point of all that was what? So yeah, the context of not being in a public school, I guess I sort of lost my train of thought there, but not being in public school, not having this understanding of sort of, I did lose my train of thought. It happens.
Oh, it's happened to me a dozen times. Giving interviews or lectures, and then I get sidetracked on something else, and then I forget what the hell I was talking about.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting detail.
Don't even feel bad about it.
Yeah. So yeah. Whoa, damn. I forget what the lead-in point was. It sucks.
You were talking about Yeats and Waite and reading those guys, and
Yeah, I know, but there was a lead-in point. Oh well, I'm sorry, listeners, because the listeners. This is what sucks. I've realized about podcasting is because the listeners aren't doing anything but listening, so they know exactly where you were, and they're like, "How did you
Yeah,
not find that? It
they're
was 2
screaming at
seconds
the
ago."
screen right
But
now.
but I'm like,
Go back to it.
I'm recalling the past. I'm looking at you. I'm distracted by your cat behind you licking itself. I'm also having like the time of my life, so it's like, of course I'm gonna forget shit. This podcast is always this one of the intentions was to make a slightly party podcast, which is why like
Mm.
there's interviews like my first interview with Rufus Opus that starts hammered.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it didn't get hammered, it started hammered at 3 a.m. With
Wow. Yeah,
Harper in the
that's
background going
pretty
from room to room, and they have just broken up, and he's like, yeah, we're broken up there. Oh my god. But I thought it would be fun for a culture to have a podcast that mixes like the experienced magician stuff with experienced academic stuff, mixed with maybe sometimes we'll get drunk and do mushrooms.
it's a hell of it's a hell of an idea for a show, I'll tell you that.
Hey, and it's worked so far. I mean, this thing blew up way bigger than I could ever have thought. I didn't think it would take off at all. I've started many podcasts before and they never took off. This one happened to, which is why I got stuck with the name Magic Without Fears. Like Marco Visconti's is Magic Without Tears. I didn't know that the URL Magic Without Fears was free. There was no book published that, so I assumed it was good to go. But the reason, and then the podcast took off because it was COVID, and I got stuck with the name in the same way Jethro Tull did. They changed their name every show because to get a new gig, but the show that they took off on and got invited back to play, they happened that night to be called Jethro Tull, but they were
Jethro
cycling through
Tull. I
names
didn't know
for
that.
the gig. Yeah, that just happened to be the name they were playing under that week because they had every time they played and they sucked and no one came, they had to change their name to get invited back. And the gig they did well, that's what they were called. And that's why this podcast has been stuck with Magic Without Fears ever since, even though I wasn't attached to the name at all.
It works. Has a nice ring to it.
Thank you, sir. But yeah, so okay, I mean, 90s magic, Enochian. I wanna say about the Enochian stuff because I think there's just so much there that people don't realize, especially when it comes to understanding the differences between the modern variations in the system and the older D formulations. And obviously, there's so many issues that you have to take on, like the different variations of the tablets, their placements. For example, something me and some of my students are working. Some of us are doing the 19-day ritual, right?
Okay.
And some of us have already done it, and some of us are prepping for it. I'm not going to say more than that because it's personal, it's ongoing works. But what was interesting to me to realize is that even though D adjusted the watchtowers and the Great Table and their position throughout over time, right? And then, as you pointed out in your book, he didn't update the diagram that shows the directions, right? So you have to change that tablet and change the diagram because he updated it but didn't change the thing.
Yeah, because the angels have been giving him everything. I may get this backwards, so if you look it up and it's the other way, forgive me. But I think the angels have been giving him everything in a Z pattern. So, like, if you think about the Great Table, it's got the 4 quadrants. So he assumed that they would be giving him the information for the upper left quadrant and then the upper right, and then diagonal down, the next one would be the lower left column and then the lower right. And that's how they had been giving him all the information, was that pattern. But then for some reason, when they actually gave him the lettering for the Great Table, they went clockwise. So they went upper left to upper right, but instead of going diagonal, they went straight down to the lower right. So they went upper left, upper right, lower left. Yeah. So he originally, when he drew down the watchtowers, he had those 2 watchtowers on the bottom in the wrong places. So he had to switch those. But that diagram with the flags, with the 12 banners, that he drew that diagram when he thought the watchtowers were the other way. And then for some reason he never updated that diagram, and it actually made it into his personal grimoire, the Soul 3191, the one that became Jeffrey James Enochian magic book.
Yeah.
That was basically Dee's personal grimoire, is what that was.
Yeah.
And that diagram is in his grimoire. He copied it over, but he didn't fix it when he copied it over. So it's led to a lot of confusion on exactly where the watchtowers are supposed to be in the Great Table.
So in your personal work now, you do stick with the diagram as it's shown in your corrected version here.
The corrected version,
Yeah.
yeah, right
So yeah,
there.
so
Because
in
that is the way that
in,
they are arranged in the rest of his work and the rest of his journals. That is how they're arranged. It's just that one diagram that he left the three names of one quadrant and the three names of the other quadrant switched.
what made it really sort of after me and one of my one of my main students, after we spent 4 hours one day really just zeroing in on the different nuances of the different formulations in contrast with the 19-day operation, what stood out was the fact that he does the 19-day operation has certain allocations, and that D produced that later on, right? So that's clearly the layout that makes sense for that initiation. So right now I'm in the middle of making new watchtowers because I have Golden Dawn ones, but I'm making new ones based on the layout for the initiation into the system. And and that's that was helpful to realize that the way the initiation is set up and those allocations, that could be your first guidepost, even if you do decide to work with like tabula rasa later on, or Recenza. Recenza.
I see the
Abbondava. Well, everyone says Recenza, but I think
I would say Recenza, yeah.
Yeah, technically, I think it could be Recenza or Recenza, but not Recenza. But I think Recenza is the funnest. Maybe Recenza.
A lot of times with those words, yeah, the C's we in it, because of our modern English, we interpret them as an S sound when they're not. So yeah, it's probably not Recenza, but well, I think it's because I also see it as like the word recension. You know, like if you have a recension, like the French recension of the Book of Abramelin. So it just sounds to my ear like it should say the recentia.
Yeah.
But it's probably wrong.
It doesn't matter. Those aren't the words that I would worry about pronouncing.
Yeah, exactly. The keys, those two might want to get a little closer to right.
Yeah, how we pronounce Latin is whatever, as long as the person can understand what you're saying, which usually we can, because Latin's a very clear language, relatively. Yeah,
it's pretty straightforward.
So when it comes to, we started when talking about Enochi, and I talked about the what we were doing with the Bonorum King and Prince with the 14 stations, the lining up of them with the prince and the king to the same planet. To me, at the time in the Golden Dawn, of course, that's what I was being taught, so it made sense. But when I saw, after hearing your course with Jason Newcomb, that there's more nuance in the original material, my thought was, why would you eradicate and run roughshod over all this fabulous nuance? Like the idea that the princes correspond to a different planet than the king, like that, surely that seems to point to the fact that the relationships between these spirits are actual relationships, and that you can't just smush things together because they have the same mark on their forehead or whatever.
Right. You know, it's like with the nuances, a force of a force. You get some of that in the Golden Dawn, mainly with the elements, you know, like you'll have fire, but within fire you've got all four elements. So you'll have fire of fire, air of fire, earth of fire, and water of fire, you know. And it's the same with the planets. You've got like the king of Venus, who again I believe is what, Balagon. And because I was trying to figure it out before we started recording, but I think it's Balagon. But anyway, the king of Venus is Venus of Venus, and then his prince is the next planet in the list of Venus, and then the next royalty is the next planet of Venus. So it's like, yeah, it's always the planets operating in and with each other. So there's always this interrelationship going, and even with the way they're on, you know, they were given to D in this round table, and they're not even all together. Like the king of the planet is in one list, is in one line of that table, but the prince that's under him is not his prince. You have to go to the next section to get his prince. And so it's very encrypted, you know, it's very encoded, and you have to
Yeah.
know the secrets on how to pull the names out properly and who goes with who, you know. And yeah, it's that's the kind of thing that fascinated me. Like I said, when I opened that very first book, even if it's the Schuler book and I make fun of the Schuler books, there it was enough to fascinate me, because when you have a mind for magic anyway, that you've got a mind that likes to seek patterns, and Enochian magic is all about these patterns through the tables and through the names, and it's just it grabs you. It's a puzzle, and it grabs you, and it won't let you go. It hasn't let me go now for what's it been since 1993? What's it been? 40
Yeah.
years? I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know. I guess 30 years, but yeah.
Yeah. That's yeah, you got into Enochian magic when I was you know, doing my babysitter certification course at age 12.
Oh wow.
Uh,
Well, I wasn't that much older. I would have been about what, 18, 19 or so, I guess.
yeah, you know, 2 years later, of course, I was chanting aethers from Enochian physics or whatever by the Schulers,
Wow.
you know, at
I'm
our Wiccan
sorry.
Sabbats. Well, it was what it was. You know, the Enochian
It was
physics
my
came out, and we were like showing our science teachers, "Did you know about this?"
Did you know about this? I had that book too. Actually, someone got it for me as a gift. That was the second Schuler book I ever owned. The first one was the Enochian workbook, the really big one.
Oh God,
Yeah.
we were so
And
disappointed with that. We
and you know,
tried,
and the thing
we
is,
tried.
I make fun of the books, but the big sin in the books was that they didn't actually say anything. Like, if you picked it up in the store and you looked at the table of contents, it was like, oh, here's a chapter on how to scry in the spirit vision, and here's a chapter on the ethers, and here's a chapter on, this is great. And then you get it home, and the chapter on each chapter is like less than a page long, and it just kind of says that yes, this thing exists, and then they go into the next chapter. So I always felt like I just wasn't getting anything out of those books, you know but they were still the starting point. They were still what introduced me to it all, And I might
Yeah,
have moved on to better sources afterward, but like you said, it is what it is, and it's what got me started. It was the first book I looked into and said, "Yeah, I have to know what this is."
how important do you think the role of Enochian magic and the spirits conjured through the tablets, you know, ye mighty archangels, angels, rulers, kings, and elementals, are to the elemental initiations in the Golden Dawn?
Well, I mean,
This is very much a Hierophant to Hierophant kind of question, eh?
yeah, it's
Like,
it's it's
in
it's
your
not an
experience
easy
as a
question to
Hierophant,
answer. Yeah, because it really depends on the how you're looking at it. Like, for example, I could say they're not that important in the sense that there's nothing in the ritual. Like, there's no point in the ritual where you invoke specific angels out of the tablet to do specific things. You could put a lot more focus on the god forms. Of course, that's we're getting into neophyte versus the elemental rituals, but you could put a lot of focus more on the officers and what they're doing and their forms, and the different deities that are involved, like I mentioned in Philosophus and Practicus. You're taken around and you meet the different Kabiri in one, and you meet the different Egyptian deities in another. So you could say, well, the Enochian entities aren't even there, so you could say they're not important. But for each elemental initiation, you begin by opening up the tablet of that grade. Now, I can quibble over whether or not it's the right tablet, versus, deep purist material, but that's not here nor there. In the tradition of the Golden Dawn, you start the grade, you call in the elemental force literally through that tablet by invoking its names. So in that sense, it's absolutely of primary importance. You literally couldn't do anything else without it. It is the source of the energy that you're calling in, and everything else flows out from it. So it's interwoven into the tradition in a very subtle way. Like, the officers will see the Hierophant, the officers will participate in the Hierophant going over to the tablet and opening it at the beginning of the ceremony. and then closing it at the end. In fact, the new initiate is actually involved, actually stands there with the Hierophant when the tablet is closed at the end. So yeah, supremely important. But you're not going to find active, what you would call Enochian magic in the outer order. You know, that was all
Yeah.
reserved for the inner order only. And of course, they have their own, I say they, it's the Golden Dawn. I should be saying we, but I'm more interested in the deep purist stuff. But when you're doing Golden Dawn Enochian magic, they have their own way of doing it and their own very, very elaborate tradition, which is also, again, very interwoven into the greater Golden Dawn current and their tradition specifically. So yeah, it is very important. It is absolutely important. I don't, I'm like, if you were to take that out, you could legitimately say it's not a legitimate, you know, like let's say you took the earth tablet out of the Zealotr ritual. You don't open it during the opening. You don't have the new Zealotr throw the salt toward the tablet. You know, I'm not saying anything here that's not published. Um, you could make the case that that's not a legitimate Zealotr ceremony, you know. But yeah, there would be nothing in, like, we're not going to reveal any Enochian mysteries to an outer order initiate. We're not going to be given any Enochian rituals to do. You're not going to have to evoke any of those particular angels, or, you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
none of that is of concern to the initiate, the candidate, as they're going up through these grades. It only becomes more of a concern once you're in the inner order. And like I said, you get that inner order version of the script and you get to see what's going on the astral. And there, you know, the energies coming into the tablet and stuff become a lot more apparent and more important to what you're doing in the ritual. So
Yeah.
it's
No,
not a yes or, yeah, it's not a yes or no answer really. It's a subtle and nuanced kind of answer.
that's why I asked. Uh,
Yeah.
that's one of those $5 questions.
Yeah,
And
yeah, a
I'm
lot of questions are like that. You know, there's never a black or white yes or no easy answer.
well, yeah. And what's interesting for me as someone who got to do several terms as Hierophant, blessed be he, you know, like privilege of the lifetime. Um, the question sitting on that throne, and I don't know if you know what I mean, when your sort of head opens up and then everything streams into the back of it, and you're like, oh, I'm part of everything, and you're like, oh shit. It's like the only way you can express the profundity of that is with silence, honestly, as you know. And but the more you do it, this you start to wonder, where are the influence. You start to, you know, feel the different influence in the temple. And there's so much going on with the god forms. There's so much going on with all of the stations and all that stuff. But you know, in recent years I started to ask myself the question, how significant is the Enochian in this? Because it was something I always took for granted. And I was wondering, like, you can answer however you wish on that, but I'm also curious, do you think Westcott added the Enochian to the manuscripts before he gave them to Mathers? Or do you think the Enochian was already in the manuscript, the ciphers?
Well, I mean, that would all depend on whether or not I even believe Westcott wrote the cipher manuscripts.
No,
I mean,
I'm taking for
you
granted. I'm
know,
assuming that he
I
didn't.
mean,
We're assuming he didn't. Do you
if
think
he
he
didn't,
added
then no.
them?
I think if he didn't, then no. I think the tablets and stuff were already mentioned in the cipher manuscripts, but um, yeah, I'm not so sure that the cipher manuscripts have much of an origin before the Golden Dawn anyway. So,
It
and
was probably
Westcott
written by
was the
Mackenzie or
one
Hockley,
who
right?
had the, what's that?
It was probably written by Mackenzie or Hockley.
Well, that's a pervading theory, but I mean, we don't know. I
Yeah, of
mean, it
course.
could have just as easily have just been written by Westcott, and we do know that Westcott is the one that was uh, the Enochian Stan in the original order. I mean, I mean, even today, right now, we're still getting stuff um comes into the order from other sources, other collections and private collections and stuff, but we're still finding stuff that Westcott did. Uh, uh, Tabitha just, I say just, God, this is years ago now,
I
but she
still haven't
published
got it.
that book called, yeah, Book of the Concourse of the Watchtowers. That apparently is, I mean, a lot, I've read the book and a lot of it is the concourse of the forces that she just kind of elaborated on. But there's a lot of stuff in there and I think she appended it onto the end, these tablets that Westcott had created. And I mean, just there's just so much Westcott stuff. So it's like whenever you think of early Golden Dawn and Enoch, it wasn't Mathers. He wasn't really that into the Enochian stuff. And as far as we know, Woodman, what his main thing was Kabbalah. And so, yeah, any Enochian inclusions in the Golden Dawn corpus, Westcott is, to me, is always the main suspect.
That's why I was curious if you thought he
I
might
even
have added
suspect
it.
him for I'm sorry to interrupt, but
No, it's fine.
um the what was it, Sloan? Oh no, not Sloan. No, maybe it was Sloan. I'm spacing right now, but it's the book that was published as The Practical Angel Magic of John D. and
Yeah,
Edward Kelly.
yeah.
And
It's the
it's the
expansion
source book.
of 3191.
Yeah, it's basically the source book for Golden Dawn and Enochian magic. That is where all the basic rules for what would become the order system are laid out. And I even suspect Westcott as being possibly the author of that. I mean, so
Interesting. That
yeah.
is interesting. Yeah, yeah. Like Book H, or is it Book
Book
H?
H,
Yeah,
thank
Book
you.
H.
That's what I was
Yeah,
trying to come up
yeah.
with. My brain wouldn't. I've even written about Book H and I couldn't. Thank you. Okay, so yes,
Teamwork,
Book H.
Frater.
I even suspect Westcott as being the author of Book H. So it's yeah, he's
Interesting.
kind of the Enochian guy from the original order. I could be wrong, but I'm saying that's my
Yeah.
suspicion.
Well,
He's always my first suspect.
that's why I think if we assume that the ciphers weren't written by Westcott, and I don't think the ciphers were written by Westcott, I think he did find them or get them given to him, because Hockley and Mackenzie, and there's all these, if you, because it's so easy to think that the guys that Westcott was like one of the first major occults. Like, no, there's always been major occults. Like Franz Hartmann, hello, there's like lots of major players you just never hear about. Like today,
Oh
like
yeah.
people know who
Oh yeah.
you are. A few
Oh,
people know who I
they
am.
didn't come out of out of a vacuum by a long
Exactly,
shot.
right? Like for every person like you or me who is semi-public, there's 50 people that aren't.
Yeah.
And many of those people might be know just as much as us, if not more, and be just good. We don't know. They're not public. Who knows? A lot of the greatest magicians you've probably worked with, no one knows their names, I'm guessing.
No one
But
knows them. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. They don't. Oh, that's what I said earlier. It's like where it comes to the Golden Dawn, you don't see me, talk about it much in the public sphere. I'm not in Golden Dawn groups. I used to be in a couple, but I got out because I just couldn't stand them. I don't even publish Golden Dawn books, at least not yet. I think I offered something to like one Golden Dawn book was the Flying Rules book. Uh,
I love that book.
what was that, a decade ago or longer now? But yeah, that's been the most prominent Golden Dawn work I've actually published. So yeah, it's because it's about your personal work, and it
Yeah,
really shouldn't be aired out in public because all it does is result in, like we were talking about with the ordination thing, with people picking it apart and wanting to question each other and who's got the bigger balls and who's got it's just better. And yeah, so I happen to be a big mouth. Chick and Tabitha happen to be occult big mouths. We're the ones who go out and publish or make videos or classes or whatever, it is we're doing. And how both of us are running stores. They've got the Golden Dawn shop, I've got Doc Saul's. But there are hundreds of adepts out there, that you just never hear about.
yeah. Well, when
They're
people
not
talk,
publishing, they're not running their mouths online or doing podcasts or
yeah,
all that stuff like
yeah,
we do.
yeah. Well, when I started doing the podcast and people started noticing me, of course, they're like, "Yeah, but who the fuck are you?" And like one of the many that just did my training, I did my thing, and then went and lived his life. From after I shut down the temple and gave up being imperator of Canada for our order, I was like, well, let's go live my life and see what all of this stuff I've learned can do in the world. Let's go test it. Let's go see what I can make of my life. And most adepts, that's all they ever do, right? Like it's easy. So many people have talked shit or do talk shit about, the order I was in and zinc and all that. But it's like, most of the people who I met and trained with and trained by and trained, like most of them are wonderful, absolutely wonderful, and you'll never know their names. Some of them are even dead now. One just passed away, actually, rest her soul. Like a major teacher of mine from '96 onward, just passed away of, I believe, Parkinson's. I don't. not good. But and these are, you'll never know their names or their accomplishments, and these are often they're amazing magicians and amazing
Mhm.
human beings, right? And it's like, that's what I love about the magical traditions is generally outside of the group that you work with or the people who you learn from and the people you teach, no one knows what you're really into because it's not
Right.
important. It's not important what
We're
gives
the
you the,
exception. We're not the rule.
yeah, right. And I went public. I don't even know why I went public and started doing everything I do. I'm like, I'm pretty transparent with my life these days, and I don't know what triggered that. Honestly, what I think it was my higher genius. Like, is like, you got to do this now, or you can do this now. And I know for a fact it's for a limited time. I feel that, which is why I'm burning so brightly with it and like so on fire with it. Like, I wake up and I start, and I don't stop till I go to bed. I'm doing everything I can to serve people, and then at some point I won't feel bad about vanishing to a cottage in some Celtic country one day with my lute and uilleann pipes and just singing hymns to the fairies till the cows come home and I die. Like, I won't feel bad about that. But I'm definitely going to enjoy this phase of my life as much as I can and connect with people like you and anyone else who wants to really dig their teeth into this material because it's so juicy and life affirming in my experience. I mean,
Real life changing in my experience, that's for
yeah,
sure.
life changing. I mean,
And
damn,
if
damn.
you're
Like,
called to it, but it definitely is a calling. I do believe, as a Gnostic, obviously, I believe it's something that you're born to. You're either a Gnostic or you're not.
oh yeah,
And even in the Golden Dawn, it's often missed, but it's said in the Neophyte, the very first initiation is that God can awaken into momentary life the magical passions in any heart, even the heart of a child, but they cannot reign unless you have the natural virtues,
to
unless you were
be
literally born
to be
to use to
their
be their
throne.
throne. That's it. So, I mean, that's why you have people that'll come through and then just vanish. But if the work is being done right, especially once you get into the inner order, if you take your 5-6, there are going that it should slingshot you off in whatever your true will is. And for some people, they're going to be like Chicken Tabby. Their true will is to be Golden Dawners, to run the order, and there are others of us who we become adepts, and that is our calling to teach in that order, to help run that order. And then others are called to publish, and they'll write books, and they may give classes and lectures, and it may be on magic, but it can also be on something else. This adept goes and becomes an accomplished astrologer. This adept goes off and becomes an expert in linguistics. This adept goes off and actually gets into politics and becomes a political leader. This adept, so it's not always going to be magic. It's not always going to be occultism. But if the work is done right, it should take you to where you are supposed to go, and it's been fascinating over the past couple of decades watching that happen to people, watching them work their way up to that order and then get into the inner order. And then you got to, some of them stay and work in the order, or some of them have other things to do, but they also stay. And then some of them just kind of fly away. And you never even see them again. But whatever they needed to get from the experience, they got that they can apply to their life. And then they go on to achieve what their true will was for them to achieve, which is a stark difference from what you hear people say online. Oh, the Golden Dawn system is flawed. All it ever does is produce broken people. And that's because those are the ones you hear it from. Those are the ones who get online and make a bunch of noise and, complain about everything and start fights with people and, break into people's homes and do all sorts of other ridiculous, crazy things because they didn't follow the system. They didn't follow it all the way through. They thought they knew better. They thought they didn't need to follow the system, that they were ascended beyond the system. And those are the broken ones. Those are the ones who go out and unfortunately give the rest of us a bad name, but that's unfortunately the nature of that beast.
Do you are you heir apparent?
I don't think there's any such thing.
I
We're all
I,
just there doing the work,
I
you
mean,
know.
what I mean is when are you going to
Nobody,
be in a leadership
nobody.
role? Are you going to be in a
Yeah,
leadership role eventually in your order?
well, I'm in a leadership role
More than you.
now.
I know that. Yeah, I know that.
I actually hold an office position, a permanent office
Okay.
position in my temple. I don't really want to get into
Enough
a lot
said.
of
Enough said.
details on that. But yeah, I'm in a leadership role now. But as far as like heir apparent and all that, I mean, no one's thinking that way. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I meant it in a
Um,
cute way, not literally.
yeah. But I
I
mean,
figured after a couple hours I could be a little loose with my words, but maybe not.
yeah, no, it's not that. It's just that, Chick is getting up there.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he's at a point in his life where he's thinking about how he wants to arrange things. But I wouldn't want to see anyone in the order try to make a grab for anything, you know what I'm saying? Or try to insinuate themselves as like an heir apparent or something like that, because we're really all just there doing the work. And if Chick were to go tomorrow, hope that doesn't happen, but if Chick were to go tomorrow, everyone, I can tell you right now, every single person in that temple would come together and make sure that everything that needed to get done got done. You know what I'm saying? So there are already leaders there, and they're very, very well trained. And they had a thing back when I first joined, filling the rows. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
Okay, this was, now remember, this was 20 years ago, and they had this theory that if filling the rows means that among your initiates you have, think of the gold, the rose in the middle of the rose cross. So you've got the 12 outer petals, the 7 inner, and the three central petals, right? So they said that the theory was, to fill the rows you have to have 12 5 6s, 7 6 5s, and 3 7 4s. And they felt that if they could fill the rows, that would ensure the order would last forever. That once the Ciceros pass away, the next generation could pick it up, and you could feel safe that it would go on into the future. And like I said, they told me that little plan when I first joined. So that was a good, over 20 years ago now. And I would say at this point, I can't say for the three middle. I know they have filled the rows, so I know they filled the three middle petals. I couldn't say how many times over they filled those three, but I do know for a fact the other petals of the rows have been filled many times over at this point. So like there is absolutely no question that once they're done with their work, and they lay down their scepters for the last time, that there is so many people above the grade that I hold right now that are more than willing, trained and capable and willing to pick up and keep that torch going. So it's something that's kind of on my mind, a lot, and
Yeah.
just
Well,
because of,
it affects all of us in the Golden Dawn world, even who
yeah,
aren't part of your order.
yeah,
Somehow,
I imagine
somehow,
it will.
somehow it
it
does.
and in that day when they do pass things on, and our generation becomes the elders of this tradition, is going to be a very
Strange.
surreal time. I can't even imagine what that's going to be like. And I know, like I said earlier, I know it's going to bring a lot of bullshit. I know there's going to be so many people crawling out of the woodwork, and that's why I put the hammer down on those guys in that conversation, and why I'm making that so clear that I will not play that game, and I will not tolerate that kind of stuff. Don't come to me acting like you knew Chick and I've never heard him mention you. Don't come at me telling me what Chick said, and you know what I'm saying, you know what's coming. You've been in this community long enough to know what happens. And I'm stealing myself for it. So it wasn't that I was taking your joke too seriously, but I know that there's a lot of stuff
Yeah,
coming.
there's a
and I
reason to
and I
take it
have,
too seriously.
yeah, and I want to make my stance so very, very clear to you, to anybody listening, to everyone in the community, that this is something I take seriously, and I will not play the traditional games. I don't, I will not. So it's the order will run on. Even if I were to leave today, the order would go right on without me.
Yeah,
So
that's great.
yeah,
And I was so glad when it became a home for adepts that left our order as well. Like, people who taught me, we mentioned them already, and like Eric V. Cisco, he was on the podcast and he's already talked about this, so this has already been public. He's already acknowledged all this stuff.
yeah, we've
You know,
we've taken in members from several orders
because
that
he was meant to get initiated into Portal at our temple. He talked about this already on the podcast, so it's legit to talk
yeah.
about it. And I was trying to get him allowed in the initiation, and they wouldn't let him in. And so he left
Mm.
our order. Right? It's like to this day, I'm like, I still don't know how that happened to you. And that was the only Portal initiation I ever got to be an officer in. And I was really sad to see someone I was sort of a teacher of get excluded. But that happened a lot.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
I'm so glad, he of course went on to Griffin after first and became Griffin's Cancellarius, and then he joined your. And he said on my buddy Edward's Esoteric Nerd podcast, an encounter with you. He said when he was, I think, early working with you, you were, I think it was, you were like, so you were in Zinc, you were with Zinc, then you were with Griffin, and now you're with us. He's like, yep, and you're like, what's wrong with you?
Well,
That,
at the time it
this is my
was,
paraphrase of Eric's words on the
yeah,
Esoteric Nerd podcast.
yeah. Well, I've probably asked him more than once, when
He just
people, and
loves
like I
it.
said, we've been kind of a refuge for, I mean, people do sometimes get to us after they've been through very bad experiences, and I won't even name groups because there's more than one. And it like back when he came in, I probably had an incredulous view of it because I hadn't seen that kind of thing before, and
How
it
nice
kind
for
of
you.
yeah, but it impressed me too that Chick was willing to take them in and kind of give them a chance, and not just give them a chance, but I tell you something, I've watched these people and they come to us and they've been very damaged, and you can tell. And to watch them spend years with us, slowly working through the trauma that whatever they've been through gave them, you know, and because it's linked to the Golden Dawn. If it was a Golden Dawn group, it's very linked to that symbolism, and it's very linked to, and then they come to us and we run things very differently, and we give them time and we give them space. And it's very fascinating to watch them. Sometimes you want to wring their necks, sometimes you're just like, get off the floor, you're not doing anything right. Sit down, just sit down and watch. But we don't do that. We let them work, and we let them work through, and it's in watching them heal and watching them learn how to do things right and watching them kind of rebalance those energies within themselves. And it's fascinating, and it's very heartwarming to see them. It's like they find a family. They were looking for a family when they found the bad group. They were looking for that connection, and somebody took advantage of them and hurt them. And then they come to us and they're very not willing to trust. You know what I'm saying? Just the fact that they come to us at all. There's a lot of people that go through those bad experiences and then they never want to see Golden Dawn again.
Huh.
You know, and that's very sad. But I can understand it. They experience trauma in that environment. So that environment can be very triggering for that trauma. But the people who come to us and say, no, I know this sucked and I know what happened to me was wrong, but I want to do this. I believe in the system. And yeah, I've watched it heal them, and I've watched it get them back on their feet, and that's very heartwarming.
Yeah.
And I mean that's on top of the people like me who come to the order as just completely screwed up human beings. I may not have come from a cult or an exploitative predatory group or anything like that, but I had my own problems, I had my own insanities, I had my own issues, and I came in, and of course I came in like I don't know, like a lightning bolt, I mean, I just came through creating all kinds of havoc and everything else. I'm surprised the Ciceros didn't kick me out. So, it's like, regardless of what your traumas are and what you've been through, it's like the Ciceros are just amazing, and the patience that they have I tell you what, I would have kicked me out of my order long ago. I mean, as soon as I started with the BS I put them through, as soon as I started with that, if it had been me, I'd have just said, dude, just get out of here. We don't got time for you, you know. But they never do. They always let people work through their shit. They always let people work through their demons, and it's kind of amazing. And then you see those people in the inner order, and they're in that vault, and they're finally they're that culmination of everything that they fought for and worked through, and it's just amazing. I know I'm going on. I should let you ask the next question,
No,
but
no, I love
that's
it.
just one of the most amazing things that, you know, to see in the order is, like we said before, it's that life changing. You know, that's what it's for. That's what the Masonic initiations were supposed to be. You know, but then somewhere along the way they got lost and they forgot what that all meant. And now you've got the Golden Dawn initiations, which are again meant to do that, meant to mature you, grow you, rectify you, make you better, stronger, you know? And that's
Yeah,
just amazing.
yeah, yeah. Maybe I think we need to uh take Masonic initiations and add the DMT back into it.
You've been reading PJ Newman's books.
He's on the podcast in a few weeks, baby, on a
Is he?
Masonic
Oh,
roundtable. I'm doing a Masonic roundtable with him and Lenny Peterson and some other top Masons and magicians, and it's going to be in it. I've been trying to arrange this roundtable since January. I've done two
that's
roundtables.
gonna be
The first
nice.
one was
That's gonna be
great. The
nice.
first one was great with who did Rod and Ring? You know, the guy who did Rod, Sam Davis.
Not familiar with Rod and Ring.
Also Reverend Zemi, who did Book of Flesh and Feather, which is over on my altar, and he's the Jehudi priest and writer. If you don't know Reverend Zemi, check out his stuff. If you like Tahuti, especially, you know, amazing work he's done with Tahuti. And also Jack Grail and Celeste Mott were on the first round table. The second round, then that was great. The second round table was a shit show, Golden Dawn shit show. One guy bailed last minute because
Oh my God.
he was like, I want to rant about this political stuff, so you guys got to put up with that. I'm like, well, what if I have a different opinion on it? And he was like, oh my god, and like done, he wouldn't be on it. And so it all fell apart, and then just a few of us got together and talked shit for a bit. So it wasn't really structured, and not in my opinion that great. But go check it out, listeners, if you want to see a fun time with Golden Dawn people ranting about stuff. Anyway, and this new one hopefully will be the best one yet, the best one ever. And I've been putting it's so hard to get all when you try and get 5 people together all at the same time. So
Yeah,
finally it
that's
looks like we're nailing it down, and we're going to dig into the Philosopher's Stone
oh good.
and DMT, because
Awesome.
it his research, the facts at least deserve to be highlighted, identified, highlighted. And honestly, when I read Angels in Vermilion, I was like, okay, here's my experience. My I think everyone in the entire cult world, everyone needs to read this, and then we'll talk.
Hmm.
Then we'll talk. Like, let's just
Yeah.
the,
You
the
know,
book that
it's funny because he
challenging
sent
me.
me that. Was it Angels? I think it was Angels in Vermilion.
That's the
Yeah,
new
yeah,
one.
it
Yeah.
was. Yeah, it was Angels in Vermilion because he sent me a copy of it. And because I think I ended up writing a blurb for it. Well, okay, I wrote a blurb for it, but
Yeah.
it was kind of long, and I think he made it a forward in the book or something.
Yeah.
So I can't wait to get my copy. But he sent me this, and I knew him from Facebook, and I only knew him from Facebook at the time, you know. So at this point, he's just a name to me, PG, you know. And you know, a nice guy. I talked to him, but he wasn't much more than a name. And you know, people give me books to read a lot, you know, and I try to read them when I can, you know, I really do, but sometimes I get behind and I can't get to them. And Angels in Vermilion was one that kept getting pushed back. And I was just like, you know, I don't want to read this thing, you know. I just like
Really
so I don't
should.
want to read it.
Let me
And you know,
push
the title doesn't tell you much about what's in there either, you know, Angels in Vermilion, you know, so I'm thinking it's
the
just going to be
Philosopher's Stone from D to
some
DMT.
yeah, you
So
know, and
it
I'm just
does.
thinking
You know, it really
just
does
from the
look.
file name, I'm thinking like it's nothing. I'm thinking like it's some book on angels or something, you know.
No,
And then
it really, honestly, I don't know how you could look at the facts presented in that book or the information it really does look like that Dee and Kelly knew what DMT was, were able to make it, and the red powder Kelly had was DMT. And for years I thought that wasn't the case, but I didn't know some of the facts that he points out. I didn't know
That he
how
points
prevalent
out.
DMT use was amongst alchemists, especially the Cagliostro rite, the Russian rite. They were giving them the red stone and the white stone. The white stone had the MAOI inhibitor, which allowed it to work like ayahuasca in your body, in your stomach. So it's like, okay. And you know what? I don't know if you've done DMT, but if you have done DMT, and if you do it properly, and then you come out, you're going to be, you would, the first thing I think you would think, especially in those times, is this is the secret and I must protect it. You would be like, holy shit, I've astral traveled before, I've had dreams before, but I was there, I was actually there, you know. And now we have groups of Masons experimenting with it, playing frequencies in their ears, and they're able to go to the same place, and other people can go to the same place sometimes. What we just, I'm it's not about conclusions. We don't need conclusions, we need conversation, we need data, we need discussion.
And that's what I was getting at, because I let it sit there for so long thinking it was just another book on angels or whatever, man. And when I finally said, okay, I got some time, I'm gonna sit down and read this, look through this guy's book, and man, it was like boom, it was like, oh my god, this is incredible, because like all this information in there on the acacia tree, and how it was turned into these powders. And of course, Kelly had the red powder. There's a whole saga in the journals about Kelly having the powder and them exploring how to use it. So it's not exactly, you would think going into it, okay, Dee and Kelly using some kind of drug, that just seems like a stretch. Like, how the hell are you going to convince me, find some way to convince me without sounding like you're bending over 14 different ways backwards, because D might have drawn a curly Q at one point in a journal and you're going to try to tell me it's a mushroom. No, this was like solid information, historical sources, everything documented. I mean, it didn't prove that Ian Kelly used the drug, but it's like there was this whole tradition surrounding it that there's no way Dean Kelly didn't know about.
We know for sure they knew about it, and therefore it's highly unlikely they didn't. That wasn't what they were making use of, because there's no other drug like it in history that people have been so secretive about. Why? And you might ask, you might be a drug addict and be like, well, why? And it's like, have you tried it? And they're like, no. Try it, then you'll see.
No, well, because
it's
now I admit I haven't
not like anything else. It's not like
I haven't personally taken a DMT trip, so I can't speak from experience on that. But just, but I intellectually have understand DMT trips, and it would explain a lot about Kelly's attitudes, where like he could have these angelic visions, but they would very often slip into more like goetic chthonic kind of imagery, and that's why he would get frightened, and why he would flip out, and why he didn't want to do it, and he would just want to storm out and quit. All these mood swings and all this stuff, it really makes, because if you look at how often Kelly was having to do this, he was literally having to be under this influence every single day for hours, sometimes from sun up to sundown. They would be in there scrying these angels. So yeah, if it was the substance that they were using, at least sometimes, if not every time, it would really go a long way to explaining just how, from our perspective, how what's the word, very random Kelly could be in his moods, and what he was seeing, and what he thought of what he was seeing.
Yeah.
So it's just, the whole thing, just, he really blew my mind with that. And everything I just said didn't even come from his book. I mean, all he did was lay out the historical tradition of the acacia plant, and its connection to
and if you see these other alchemists were using it, and we know for sure they were doing that with it, how it's like saying it's like if you and everyone else in the Golden Dawn was doing something, and then someone was like, but Frater RC knew nothing of this. It's like, how
right
what?
Yeah.
like it seems very so I don't know if
I mean, Dee was the greatest alchemist of his day in England. I don't think he didn't, you know. I mean, they were searching for these powders and these elixirs and stuff.
one
How
of
could I mean? It's just
one of my
yeah. I
most
mean,
frustrating things about my buddy Chris Bennett's Liber 420 is that is in the paragraph where where he talks about this, and you wrote the forward to that, or you wrote a comment that I think turned into a forward.
it was another one of
No
those.
one should
Yeah, where
ask
it
you to
ended up
write a
being a forward.
comment about their book. They should accept the fact that you're going to be a contributing chapter. You are verbose, my friend, and I fucking love it. But in that chapter, Chris Bennett's like, I found the list of drugs that Dee had prepared for the royal within the Royal Society of all the drugs he had, but I was unable to find. Chris Bennett's like, I was unable to find anyone who could read it for me, so I haven't included it here. And I was like, maybe you pay someone to read it for you and put it in the book,
Right?
man. 777 pages, Chris, and you can't be bothered to translate the list that might be the linchpin to your entire argument in this case. Anyway, that just means it's there for someone else to do, because I would love to know what that list of drugs that Dee knew was that was then taken by Ashmole into the Royal Society. Like, I'm sure it's written in English. I don't think it's written in Latin. I just don't know how to find that list of things. But the fact that it was being used regularly by people at the time is really all the evidence you need. I don't think that's evidence that they were using it regularly in Enochian ceremonies, because Dee was such a avid diarist. Why would he exclude reference to it, especially given the fact it wasn't illegal?
I honestly, my answer to that, I think, is contained in 420 in Chris Bennett's book, because like I said in the forward I wrote to that, I had always questioned that. I mean, in all the Grimoires, you don't see mention of drugs involved with evocation rituals,
I just
and
realized that
yet
you mentioned that in the intro, which is probably why I thought to even.
it might even be why you thought of it. Yeah,
The reason
but
I'm
if
thinking it is because I read you write it.
that's funny.
We
But yeah,
can't
it's
always
not mentioned
remember our
anywhere. It's
sources.
not mentioned anywhere. And so that always made me wonder. It's like there was no drug war at the time, right? That stuff wasn't illegal. And it wasn't until Chris published his book that I came to learn. Again, someone did scholarly work that I lacked. And so I needed that. And what he taught me in that book was that, okay, maybe there wasn't a law against the drugs, but there was a drug war. You could actually, taking drugs was seen as pagan. It was a pagan thing to do.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah, and therefore, yes, you could actually get in trouble for taking drugs. They would immediately suspect you of using them for some kind of nefarious magic purpose. So that's why they weren't mentioned. Even in the Grimoires, you think, well, they're writing about magic. It's not like they're worried about being associated with magic. But again, they went to great lengths in those books to make it very clear they weren't pagan. We're not those guys. We're the good guys. We don't do what those dirty, dirty pagans do. So yeah, they did have reason to not mention their drug use. But historical records of Solomonic work that we know was done, those historical records mention drugs. Remember the famous one that where this I and I always feel stupid when I hear it later because it's easy to remember. But it was a famous guy, and it was a famous magician, and he did an evocation for a bunch of spectators in the Colosseum in Rome. They went out into the middle of the field and did an evocation.
Was it
Well,
Apollonia?
he did. I know it might be, but I don't. That's not ringing a bell. I don't think it was,
There was
but
a
I'm
bunch
not going
of
to say it wasn't. It could have been, but he did. Let me tell the rest of the story because it might ring a bell with you because it's in the Magic and History series is where this is talked about, and he did an evocation, but before the person who's writing the story recorded that the guy went around with a bowl and had everyone around the circle drink from the bowl, but the guy writing the story, refused the drink. And everyone else in that ritual reported seeing the spirits when they showed up. They literally reported all the seats in the Colosseum full of nothing but demons surrounding them. Just thousands and thousands of demons. But the guy who refused the drink didn't see anything. So we literally have on record that they used drugs in those old evocation ceremonies, but not one mention of them in the grimoires.
Have you ever tried
So
like evocation rituals with a little psilocybin?
I have not yet.
I
I
gotta
I
tell you,
have
man,
I
I was skeptical, and no,
yeah,
I'm
I
not.
have some reasons to maybe take it easy on the harder psychedelics. But
Yeah, we can only
it's
handle so much in our lifetimes.
yeah, and not just psilocybin, but I was once told by the Enochian angels that I really should try summoning them on LSD once because they said that was like a key.
Ooh,
They
I
used that
love
word.
that.
They said LSD is a key. But like I said,
Really,
I have some reasons to want to be very, very careful
me and
trying
my
to use
crew, we'll
LSD
do
like
that. We'll
that.
do that ASAP and let you know what we find. No,
Yeah, let you know what you find.
I
But
feel
yeah, I can
authorized by
imagine
you
doing the
saying this.
Jebba Fall ritual that way would be kind of insane. But that's 49 days, so you'd have to trip for 49 days. I don't think that would be good for anybody.
I believe Jason Louv on Midnight Gospel mentioned that he first worked all 30 Aethers in one night on LSD with people. So
Oh,
that's
good
an interesting.
Lord.
Of course, they were also having
That
group
would I
sex.
couldn't imagine. I just couldn't imagine doing that. Oh my God.
It sounds a
I
little
mean,
exhausting to me.
yeah, I mean I mean, even in the full Jebba Fall, it's one gate a day. Can you imagine setting 30 gates? I mean, what could you even get from them? It'd be like you'd have to go, okay, you're open, hi, bye. Next gate open, hi, bye. I mean, what would you even how could you even have a vision for each one of the gate? It's I don't
While
know.
having group sex.
All while having okay. Wow. That's Crowley level stuff
You
right
need to
there.
rewatch Midnight Gospel, brother.
That's doing Abramelin on horseback in the middle of the desert and then you don't even complete it. That's that kind of stuff right
Yeah, right,
there.
right. Yeah, totally. Man, that's it's it's so interesting. So D might have left out drug use for that reason, for the same reason that he criticized Heptameron and stuff like that, because he wanted the papal nuncios who he was planning to show his diaries to, and did show his diaries to not be like,
Right.
okay, we're gonna kill you now.
Not only that, but he was showing it off to every king and prince and emperor that he could get to look at it because he was trying to establish himself as a prophet. So, his whole idea was to go to, well, he did it to the king of Poland, but his big goal was the emperor. And he wanted to go to them with what prophets do. Your kingdom will flourish if you follow God's law, and it will fail if you defy God's law. Well, what's God's law? Well, what I tell you it is. Yeah, that's what D wanted to do, but Rudolph sent him packing. He and Kelly had to sneak out of Prague in the middle of the night.
Kelly stayed in pro. So here I was.
But yeah,
I did
Kelly
a
went back.
yeah,
He ended
Kelly.
up
Yeah,
working for the
yeah,
emperor.
because he didn't even die from the fall. He died later on. When I was in Prague last time, I
That's what
went.
we understand now. Yeah.
Yeah, they told me all this. I got all this new information in 2019 when I went back to Prague. And I spent a whole week at the tower. I did lectures there. I did lectures in the basement.
Oh,
The basement,
nice.
the alchemist basement under Kelly's tower now has three massive rooms set up like tourist sort of alchemy things, but actually they are huge stone, legit basements, like or dungeons, and there's a middle ground. Then they exit into three smaller rooms. Each of those rooms is large enough for a full temple setup,
Wow.
and the rental is next to nothing.
Oh, really? What,
Yes.
today? Or you talking
No.
about in
Yeah, the
Kelly's
cost.
time?
No, now.
Oh, wow.
They didn't even charge me, but if I had more people there, they would have charged me a couple $100.
Oh, wow.
So I'm really thinking like that's a place we could be made use of, like
Yeah.
actual dungeon under the tower, access to the top of the tower. I did some Enochian work up there because the latch was unlocked, and they're like, it's unlocked, so I guess you can go up. Normally you can't. So I went up and I started doing work. And the angels interrupted me mid-call and were like, you don't need to do that here. We're right here. And it was the most profound experience. And that experience is what set me up to be open to depurism when I did the Newcomb course that you were part of and introduced me to that. And it's been nonstop since then. So quite a lot of
Awesome.
fun. I love the if you're interested in being part of the, are you a Mason?
No, I was lucky.
Well, I'll send you
I
the
was
time.
I was gonna follow Chick in. Chick went in, and I was gonna go in after him, and I was gearing up for it, but then I saw how desperate they were for help. You know what I'm saying? You go into the Masons, and they've got 1,000 jobs they need you to do. And I saw how thin they were spreading Chick,
Mm.
and I realized that I wanted to dedicate my time to the Golden Dawn and not to the Masons, so I decided not to.
I did my first initiation and never went back. I might finish it now, but we'll see. There's a lodge in town that's a really esoteric lodge. I've talked to the guys. One of and one like the Occult of Personalities co-host is a member of that, and they've heard of me
Mm.
actually because of the podcast. And I might finish. I've started it. It might be cool to finish Blue Lodge, but I had a very bad experience with my first degree of it, and
I'm
I've
sorry.
talked about it ad infinitum on the podcast. Everyone who's ever heard of my experience has been like, "Wow, that sucks. Sorry about that." They were just dishonest with me, and I was coming straight out of Zinc Land, so it was
Oh,
like
that's a great thing
I
to
was
hit.
like,
Yeah.
you lied to me about something that was going to happen in the initiation.
Mm,
Bye. You know,
yeah.
like I
Red
very
flag.
hyper reactive to any BS, and really the bottom line was I just didn't want to be part of a group that sat around after every night after their work toasting the Queen of England and drinking scotch. Like that just seemed like not what I was there for. If I want to drink
Yeah, and
scotch,
that's
I'll
what
go to an
happened to
Irish
the
pub and
Masons.
play the Irish hand drum and play the bodhrán for a few hours and get free scotch.
And yeah, it just became it's a social thing. And I say that, and I don't mean to write off
Not a
all of
bad thing.
Masonry that way, because a lot of the younger Masons, I know for a fact, are very esoteric minded, and
Yeah, my
they
experience
want
was
the
20 years
symbolism, they
ago.
want the magic.
It's
Yeah,
changed
yeah,
since then. It's changed since then.
yeah,
I knew when I had my experience in '04, I was like, this is probably going to be different one day. But at that time, there was no young people, and they were
no
not
young
honest
people.
because they were
They're
so
dying
desperate
out.
to
They're
get
literally
anything.
dying out
They
because they're
were,
all growing old.
but
And
now it's revitalized.
I
So
think it is. And I know a lot of people, when Chick joined the Masons with the intention of learning about the origins of the order.
yeah,
That was his whole point, because he
yeah,
knows we were founded by Masons.
yeah.
Um, Masons who were working in a different order, but I mean, they were all Masons. So he wanted to learn more about us. And his honest experience was that he got there and he didn't really learn anything about the Golden Dawn, but he started teaching the younger Masons there, who were the more esoteric minded ones that were not just there to drink beer and complain about their wives. He would teach them what the symbolism was. He knows what the pillars mean. He knows what the password IAO means. He knows what all that means. So he would give lectures and start teaching that stuff.
Huh.
And we would get influxes of young Masons following him back from the lodge to our temple. And a lot of them didn't really stay. A lot of them would just get the neophyte and then move on with what they were wanting to do. But yeah, there was this really interesting period there where it was almost like a tug of war between the older Masons, who just wanted things to stay the way they were, and they didn't need people like Chick coming in and stirring up things. you know and then you had the younger Masons who were hungry for more and looking to learn the mysteries. And so yeah, that was. And if you're saying that the esoteric young Masons are still out there, and that's and there's some revitalization in that organization, that would be great. That would
Oh,
be awesome
it's
to hear.
happening big time from what I'm seeing.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that's good. I
You're
mean,
getting
it's
whole lodges that are going
it's new
esoteric.
blood.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not across the board, but it's happening. Anyway, it's cool. Young men are so lost these days. Anything to help them in the you know maelstrom of our culture is not a bad thing as far as I'm concerned. I mean,
and
even when I
I
grew
think
up,
what they ought to do is, if they want to save their numbers and really open it up, they ought to just start admitting women.
so
Just
should the
get over
Catholic
the
Church
whole.
to the priesthood, by the way.
Well, yeah, same thing there. They need to start ordaining women. I mean, just be done with the whole male female thing, and just There's no reason not to let the women in at this
but
point.
but
There's
but
just no longer any reason.
but Father, there was no female apostles in the Bible because we took names
Don't make me read
like
the Gospel of
like
Mary at
no
you.
no no wait, because we took names like from Acts, like there's the apostle Julia in Acts. We changed her name to Junius, so she became a man. So there's no women.
So now she's a man.
They just fucking changed the women apostles' names to masculine names. Anyone like that's what the
Yeah.
like the I'm so glad I'm so like the one besides joining Golden Dawn, going to seminary was the best decision of my life because I walked into that place, so sure of myself. Like not only do I know the exoteric, but I know the esoteric, and I'm going up to my New Testament
Mm.
professor, and I'm like, the Gospels though were written by the apostles, and he'd be like, "You think that?
You think
Just
that, do you?
and after a couple years of Greek, Hebrew, and Aramaic lessons, you're looking at the resource text and you're like, why is it so schizophrenic? It's like because it was written by many people over a large period of
By
time.
several people. Yeah.
And you're like, oh,
I tell people that about the Bible, and not just the Gospels, the whole thing.
yeah,
It's like that is not a book. That is a collection of books written by different people from different cultures at different times who were following different religions. And then they all got cobbled together. and yeah,
it's sort of
it's a
like, let's use
mess.
a modern analogy that's really contemporary and popular. It's almost as if you were trying to tell a story based on Tolkien without having read Tolkien.
Yeah, yeah. There's way too much. Well, that goes back to what I said before about how many people want to teach you about the Golden Dawn that have never been in the Golden Dawn.
Yeah. A last
See, it's
point,
that way in every subject matter.
there's one last thing I'd like to talk to you about publicly before we switch to maybe very brief Patreon bonus segment with my patron questions. I have only one or two,
Okay.
but if you don't mind, but
Okay.
publicly, because I think people need to. So this is I would like to see in the future there be more bridges built between Golden Dawn communities and orders. We have a little we have a lot more of that going on now than we do than during the GD wars of the 90s, right? Which were so stupid and time consuming and wasteful of all of our resources and energy. But like, for example, now here in Vancouver, there's probably like 50 Golden Dawn initiates, but they're all part of different orders. So none of us can get together. None of them will get together with me and even have a coffee or study set. We can't do anything because all of our orders like don't talk to other members. And so I was talking to a member of your order here, and she's a neophyte, I think, and she's waiting to get to Portal to get a charter to start a sanctuary here. It's like, to me, I was like, that's great. You rock and roll, go for it. We had great connection, great interactions. But I was just like, this is so sad because I've talked to so many initiates of different orders, and they're all like, hey, I'd love to get together and do some stuff, but we're not supposed to mix. And it just seems so absurd to me. So absurd. We could have a Golden Dawn community in Vancouver, but instead we have pockets of people that can't hang out with each other for fear of betraying their cult, for lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to throw that out and see what your big brain thinks and feels before we move on to our patron bonus.
I don't.
Do you
I
see
don't
any
even know
hope
what to
for
say.
connectivity?
I can tell you there's nothing in my order that says we can't hang out with whoever we want to hang out with. It doesn't, if I were in an order that told me I was not allowed to associate with people from other groups, I wouldn't be in that group. And to me, that's a red flag. That's one of those red flags that you're in a cult. So, I mean, if they try to isolate you from friends or family, if they try to tell you who you can and can't associate with, they try to control your sex life, those are red flags to get out. That's not a good thing. There's no reason why, like I'll give you a great example. Someone from pretty sure he was working with Zalewski, and he's gonna kill me because he's in my friends list on Facebook and I'm now spacing his name, and I know his name too, so I'm gonna feel bad. But anyway, this was before we moved out here to the farm where we are. We still lived in Tampa, and I think they were having a meeting in Clearwater or something like that. And we were close enough because he had announced it on Facebook, and we just decided to go. And he had opened it was open. It wasn't a temple meeting of the order. It was just they were at a bookstore and they were just going to have a little study session and get together and talk about Golden Dawn. And me and Carrie and I went, and there was no problem. Why would there be an issue with us going to that and talking to them just because we're from different orders? It really doesn't make any sense to me. Or like if my order told me I wasn't allowed to hang out with the neo-pagans, so I can't have festivals on my property here. Or I mean, I can think of a
Yeah.
million examples. I mean, there's no reason for an order. Now, okay, like there are things in our order that we can't reveal. They're private to our order. So I'm not going to go to another group and do that. I'm probably not going to get together and do ritual with other order people. I mean, in the sense of Golden Dawn ritual, but honestly, I think that's more logistic than anything else. I go to temple once a month for that. I don't know why I would be going to another group to do my Golden Dawn work. You know what I'm saying? Um, so there are things that I would do just with my order, and there are things that are private to my order. But that has nothing to do with socializing. That has nothing to do with study. Has nothing to do with, like you said, building a community. I just, yeah, I can't wrap my mind around that. Why any group would tell you that you can't talk to other order members, members of other orders. It just, yeah, that just seems kind of alien to me.
It's more common than people than I think you might realize, which is unfortunate. But I think we can build a bridge. And the bridge I would propose is I'll talk to some friends in town who do conferences. We'll see what we can think. Maybe we can get a little Golden Dawn style community conference going on here. I'll get Adam Jonathan out even, you know, that's his name, right?
Yeah, Golden Dawn
Yeah,
conferences are like nothing new. We've done that.
right. Let's do one.
God,
Let's do one.
there
You
was
could
one
come.
in
We'll get you.
'97, the year before I joined the order.
Yeah.
And then there was
Yeah.
one, I think, a year or two after I joined the order. But I mean,
Yeah.
conferences are
A
nothing
quick
new. And
famous one.
hell, the conferences I went to a conference in Austin once, and I was speaking. Chick and Tabitha were speaking. There were Thelemites there. In fact, we were hosted. The conference was hosted by a Thelemite lodge.
Oh wow.
I mean, I just here's the thing. You mentioned the Golden Dawn Wars. I'm going to tell you right now, the Golden Dawn Wars are bullshit. They never happened. And I know a lot of people are going to jump up and down and swear they did happen, but I'm telling you, that was a bunch of online smoke and mirrors
Alt magic.
bullshit. It was alt magic. And it was
I
mostly
never went
done
on that
by,
group once.
it was mostly done by one person whose name I will not mention and a bunch of people loyal to him. And it was nonsense. They tossed around the term Golden Dawn faction more often than I mean, they, they did everything they could to create the illusion there was this great Golden Dawn war. But I promise you, even back then, at the height of all of that in the late 90s and early 2000s, we all got along. We got along with those of you that were in Sync's order at the time. We got along with, we got along with people that were Thelemites. We got along with Wiccans. We got along. Everyone was getting along in the real world. But if you got online, it looked like all Golden Dawn orders were fighting each other and dividing themselves into factions. But that was all the work of a very small group of people who wanted things to look that way. But none of that was happening in the real world. So you should have no problem building the community you're talking about, because those communities have always been there and there's never been anything stopping them, except, as you say, questionable leaders who want to tell their worshipers that they're not allowed to associate, or who I should say who they are and are not allowed to associate with. And that's just wrong. No spiritual group should be dictating your life to you that way ever. So that's where I stand on that.
Well, I propose we build a bridge. We find out what it will cost to get you to Vancouver. We get you to Vancouver, where DMT and peyote have been legal forever.
Well, that
And
would be
we
fun.
do a conference. Let's do a conference. We'll get Adam
That would be
Jonathan,
fun.
whoever we can get. People want, and that's enough to attract. And then that way, at least the people in the city will come together and be like, oh,
Hmm.
we can hang out and study the Z docs or whatever it is, where, whatever, just it would
Hmm.
be nice because, especially up here in Canada, we're so spread out. We're like, so spread out. People, you guys in them states, America is so small, like city by city compared to Canada. Like it's 13 hours drive to the next closest city in Canada, but it's only 2 hours
Yeah.
from me to Seattle. I can get to Seattle in 2 hours
Right.
from here. Sometimes I've done it
Wow.
way less. Don't tell anyone. You don't
Right.
want to know how fast I've
You
gotten
drive
from
like I
here.
do.
Well, no. It's how fast have I gotten from here to Zink's place when told to.
Oh dear Lord.
I know, right? Oh, Jesus
Yeah.
Christ. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. But it would be great to just get people together in town because they do. Troy
Do it,
Spriggan
man.
does a lot for the Thelemic and Masonic people. He gets Lon up here. Everyone comes out. We all have a good time. I got to hang out with Lon and do Enochian with Lon and Athena Wallander, who started actually at Temple Duty, but don't tell anyone that. And she's an Enochian person, right? You've heard of her, Athena
Oh
Wallander.
yeah, I used to be in
Yeah.
her group.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So she's from our old temple, and
I
you
was
know,
in her group when that was one of the groups of my mass exodus where I just left every group on Facebook. But yeah, I used to be in her Abermelon group.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it'd be great to get people have a thing like that that's GD focused rather than Thelema focused. Thank God, please God. Much
We
love
don't
to
have
my
a big
Thelemic
OTO
brothers
meeting.
and sisters. It's just not my cup of tea at all. I'm so not Thelemic. I'm one of
We could
the.
have some cakes of light.
I do not want to dot another's religion.
Yes, yes.
I did do my cake of light that time with Lon at the anniversary of the Book of the Law at my only Gnostic mass I ever went to that night. And that was fine, but the whole thing was not for me. First of all, I thought it was very unfair that the woman priest has to be naked and the man isn't. Why isn't the
The
man
man
naked?
doesn't have to be.
If you can
Yeah.
have the woman naked, have the man naked too, like balance. Not that I wanted to see anyone naked, of course, because I'm a Golden Dawn person, and I think you should, cover your ankles like a good Victorian. Okay. Thank you, Father Aaron Frater, for being on this podcast. And we're going to do a little bonus clip for my very supportive patrons, few though they may be. Hopefully, people listening this will support my podcast here, join my private YouTube, support my Patreon, or join whatever. Just do the thing, man. Come on, man. Come on. And
And meet us over there for the extra bonus questions.
please do. I'm going to ask you all the secrets of magic from heaven and hell.
And just 2 questions.
Exactly. Yeah. I put a lot of preparation into this. All right, so here we go. Thanks for listening, folks. Much love.